I've queued this up for your consideration. We've had a discussion. I had a lot of early discussions with the owner, subsequent discussions with my staff that resulted in what Brandon will tell you about, which is a potential agreement with the property owner to maintain the adjacent storm drain and storm drain system. So it's kind of a unique situation, and I think that, again, Brandon will touch on that. And again, I really just wanted to thank everyone for their involvement, including my staff. So I think it's been a good public process, and we certainly wait for and look forward to your decision.
All right, Brandon, the floor is yours for that recommendation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to confirm, my presentation's in full screen. Everyone can see it full screen here. We're good. Okay, Chip says thumbs up. Okay, good evening, Brandon Swanson, Community Planning and Building here for your consideration. Encroachment permit number 21-187 for Stillwell. Just a quick overview. The properties at the northeast corner of San Carlos and 5th, approximately 33,000 square feet in total. There was a hotel and restaurant renovation project that was approved recently by the Planning Commission in April of 2021. As part of that renovation, the property owner became aware of a COD, a Carmel Area Wastewater District requirement for upgrading the grease trap. Building A of the site includes, Building A includes a restaurant that has a grease trap in it. So with that in mind, the application in front of us tonight is an encroachment permit for a grease trap in the public way on San Carlos. Dive into a little more detail. In response to that COD requirement that I mentioned, Mr. Stillwell has applied for an encroachment permit to install that grease interceptor in the public right-of-way. You can see the red circle here on your screen. That's just west of the sidewalk, between where the sidewalk ends and the curb begins. That's the proposed location. The applicant has stated that there's operational issues with indoor installation and also some regulatory considerations that we'll talk about later. It would entail extending the lateral connection from the building out to the grease trap there. It would be an underground unit with a 4-foot by 4-foot brick facade maintenance cover. So imagine a tray, a 4 by 4 tray with bricks in it. It's essentially the cover for the unit. The project also includes the proposal of installing new landscaping along San Carlos for the entire frontage of the property, as well as extending the brick sidewalk north. That's currently, there's a portion of it that's just asphalt. So extending that brick sidewalk north to complete that, at least up to their property line. It's worth noting, just sort of as a bigger picture item here, typical installation of a grease trap or a grease interceptor is on private property. They're typically either in a restaurant or back in an alleyway. This would be the first grease interceptor in the right-of-way in Carmel. I snapped this picture the other day just so we had, how this works in reality. You can see the green hose there on your screen. Truck parks on the street, runs a hose across the sidewalk to wherever the location is for pumping out. And the pumping is done that way. All restaurants have a grease trap, and all of them must be pumped regularly. That's just a function of having a restaurant. So when the application came in, and as Chip mentioned, we tried to work with the applicant and also speak with members of the public. There were alternate locations that were considered. We did explore these with the applicant, including on-site in the parking lot that they have on their site, just to the east of the restaurant location, and also in the interior of the restaurant. And discussions with the applicant, the on-site parking lot, some of the challenges there is the fact that it's topographically uphill from the restaurant, which means in order for a grease trap to be there and then to go out to the street afterwards, you're going to have a pump in line there somewhere, which obviously pumps their mechanical equipment. They can fail. They're subject to power outages. So there's some potential issues there. The other issue is directly east and behind the restaurant there. There's two pretty notable cypress trees that have roots. We also found a little baby pine tree that's growing too, little guy right now. But the two major cypress trees are there. The alternate location of keeping it on the interior, the applicant has stated there's operational and regulatory issues. There could be impacts to the functionality of the kitchen space. It's not a large space. And the extent of the remodel. The other thing is the county has a preference, regulatory preference regarding grease traps to be outside. And if they're inside, they try to keep them away from food. There is a waiver that can be granted if a local jurisdiction approves, works with the county to have grease traps inside, but it is the county's stated preference to have those outside. Speaking of maintenance a little bit, obviously the proximity and the right-of-way to the storm drain does carry some level of risk, which Chip mentioned. There was some initial concerns from Public Works staff who are available tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Bob Herreri after I talk on this slide to speak a little bit more. But the maintenance agreement was drafted as a way to control some of those concerns. I've laid out here the real specifics. There's more to it, but these are the big items, the big ticket items in the maintenance agreement: weekly visual inspections, monthly pumping, specific cleaning methodology so that it doesn't damage the equipment, yearly certifications by a professional who's qualified to inspect these pieces of equipment, and record-keeping requirements to the city. The other sort of fail-safe safety measure that would be in the maintenance agreement would be recorded with the county, meaning that would remain on the deed and title, and it also requires passing of the responsibility onto any future property owners if the Stillwells no longer own the property. So with that, for a moment, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Bob Herreri, who wants to add a little bit on this slide about maintenance.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. In terms of maintenance, at first, when I first saw this application, I was definitely opposed to it putting the grease trap in the public right-of-way. That concern has been eliminated because of this maintenance and operations agreement. Without the agreement, there's no deal. With the agreement, and that includes, as the slide shows, weekly visual inspections, monthly pumping, yearly certifications, record keeping, we will enforce that with the applicant. There could be, if for some reason in the future this is not properly maintained, and there's a spill of fats, oil, or grease from that grease trap into the storm drain, then both the city and the applicant or the owner at the time could be fined some hefty penalties from the State Water Quality Control Board. And so there is that concern that the storm drain is adjacent to the grease trap location. But again, if this is properly maintained and inspected as the maintenance agreement shows, I think we can all rest easy. Back to you, Brandon.
Thanks, Bob. So as with any project, anytime you've seen me present something, I always try to tell both sides of a story. I think that's an important part of what we do here at the city, is listen and tell the story for the decision makers to do their job. So some considerations in support of this project: the pumping hoses won't need to cross the sidewalk. The picture I showed earlier, the truck would just pull up directly and pump straight out of that sort of planter area. It would be a brick cover, but in that area, it wouldn't have to cross the sidewalk. Gravity-fed locations are much more reliable. Gravity always works, even at the mystery spot, even though they tell you it doesn't, but gravity does always work. Improvements to the city sidewalk included as part of this. We talked about extending the pavers and the bricks, landscaping improvements. Some considerations in opposition. This could and probably would be precedent setting. As I mentioned, this would be the first and only grease interceptor in the right-of-way. May lead to more in the city. The city, as Bob mentioned, still does have some risk even with the maintenance agreement in place. We're ultimately still the protectors and the keepers of the city and all the storm drains and all the critters and all the ocean around us. So there is still risk for us. The case could be made this is a private property issue, not something that would be appropriate on public land. And then this could potentially prevent future utility work in the right-of-way, although that's to be determined. But these are all the considerations that we've heard in opposition. So I always think it's important to share both sides of a coin. Moving on to the review process. Oops. The review process here is important. Our title allows for the city administrator to approve encroachments. It also gives the city administrator the option to elevate them to city council when it's a unique nature or a benefit to the public interest. So in this case, the city administrator did just that. As Chip mentioned earlier, this is a perfect example of the process working, and that's why we're here tonight. And so that the public and the city council can be part of this decision. It's certainly not something that we wanted to take lightly. nor that we wanted to do at the staff level once we realized the scope of this. So that's why you're here tonight. The city council's decision is final. There's no appeal authority after the city council, and there is no resolution needed. It would simply be a motion and a vote tonight. To continue that, I've pulled and paraphrased from the code. These are essentially the review standards that the city council needs to consider when deciding whether or not to approve this encroachment. I'm not going to read them all to you, but in general, this is what our code says. Again, I paraphrase, but the words themselves, the words like need and safety and drainage, circulation and parking, public use and enjoyment, compatibility, public property and greenbelt, mitigation, those are the actual terms out of the code. And then I paraphrase after that, though. So these are some considerations for the city council tonight. And so with that, our recommendation is for the city council to consider the encroachment application and then provide direction to staff. As I mentioned, no resolution is needed. It's a majority vote one way or the other tonight. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I am done with my presentation, but available for questions, as is the public works staff.
Brandon, Bob, thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions of staff at this time before I allow for the applicant to speak? All right, I don't see anybody. Karen, I'm sorry. Yes, Karen.
Jeff, too.
Jeff.
Yes, when you talk about all the certifications, the yearly maintenance and so on, who keeps track of that? And how do we know those things are occurring if we go forward with this?
That's an excellent question. So if you recall, one of the items I put up there on the screen is a reporting requirement. And so that reporting needs to show all of those things that have happened throughout the year. Also, the city at any time can ask for status updates. I mean, that's just the nature of the maintenance agreement. But the real regulatory piece of that is that there's a reporting requirement in the agreement as well.
Okay, my further question is, somebody forgets to report. How are you keeping up with the fact that those reports are needed? Is it in a tickle file? Does it pop up once a year? How does it not end up in the forgotten pile?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think, given that this is the first one of these we were doing, we'd be setting up a new process. But absolutely, we would. We have all this great technology, our Google calendars that remind us of recurring things. So we, between us and Public Works, would set up some sort of recurring tickler, as you said, to make sure that we're following up on that.
If I may, it would also be a combination of the environmental compliance manager and the code enforcement officer who would make sure that these reports are submitted in a timely fashion each year, or as often as we want to view.
Karen, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Jeff?
Yes, thank you. Question, Bob, earlier in the presentation, you talked about, or you or Brandon talked about the risk to the city. When we have these parklets, the owners of the parklets are required to sort of indemnify the city with some sort of insurance policy to protect the city in case something untoward happens in a parklet. Is that a possibility here too? So for example, if Mr. Stillwell's grease trap malfunctions, and I know these things are unlikely to malfunction, but if it fills up or otherwise ends up in the storm drain and we end up with, a big fine from the marine sanctuary people or someone else, are we protected from that? Are we indemnified? How does that whole assumption of risk work here?
So if I was going to say, I can answer that, Bob. I actually have the maintenance agreement up in front of me. So the maintenance agreement that was included as an attachment, section 9, is indemnity and insurance.
Right, that's where I was going.
So the applicant in this case, Mr. Stillwell, would have to renew this insurance every year, would take out a big policy at the beginning. This is a little bit different than the insurance policy, for example, that a homeowner would take out when they build a walkway across the public right-of-way, one of these sort of lifetime $1,200 policies. Are we envisioning the same sort of thing? Are we envisioning a yearly requirement?
So the requirement is for the owner to maintain liability insurance with amounts not less than $1 million per occurrence and $2 million in the annual aggregate.
And the burden would be on the applicant to provide that insurance on an annual basis. A failure to do so could be an enforcement issue. So
to Karen's point, such a insurance requirement would be subject to perhaps this annual review that we may or may not be doing?
We would be doing the annual review, and that would be part of the possibly a checklist to make sure we have a current insurance and indemnification information on file.
And another question, Bob, could you talk a little bit about the sort of county preferences to have these things outside? Is that a county rule? Is that a rule or a preference? Is the state involved in doing all this stuff? What does COD think of that? A little bit of background on that whole issue.
I'm not an expert on grease traps, but my understanding is both COD and the state health department now require grease traps to be located outdoors. Certainly, it would behoove everyone to have the grease, like for future applications, because this is just the first time we're seeing this issue. It will happen again. For whenever possible, we would want to have that grease trap put on the private property side. But unfortunately, in Carmel, it's a mostly built out city. We're not building new restaurants here. We have topography challenges all over the place. We have drainage challenges. So each case would have to be each site would have to be a case-by-case basis as to what's the best location to put the grease trap. But preferably it would be on outside and on private property. That would be the best objective. And as Brandon noted, that was an option that was looked at in this case. Unfortunately, in this particular case, we would be relying on a pump rather than on gravity, which concerns me. Would be potentially impacting the cypress tree roots, and it would be a lot more plumbing into the sewer system. So I considered the San Carlos option to be the least worst. It's not preferred. It's the least worst option. It'll allow them to go forward with this restaurant in compliance with all the state and local rules.
And so if we don't grant this permit, Mr. Stillwell is going to have to get some sort of exemption from COD or the county or the state health authority, whoever that may be. And your feeling is that he will get it, but they're not going to like giving it to him.
I honestly don't know if he would get it or not.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions before I go to the applicant? I don't see anything. Mr. Stillwell.
Hello.
Mark, how long would you like for your testimony?
What's traditional? 5 minutes or so, or?
If you need 10, you could have 10, but you might want to save a few minutes for rebuttal.
I do want to save a few so let's say 10, and I'll try to be quicker than that and save a little time.
All right, so 10, and you want to take 3 out of that 10 for rebuttal, and then you got 7 minutes?
That sounds pretty good.
All right, don't constrain yourself. All right, the floor is yours, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Potter, members of the City Council. For the record, my name is Mark Stillwell. My wife Susan and I own Carmel Lodge, and we're the applicants for this encroachment permit. Thank you all for your time today doing the field trip as well. I also want to thank your staff for working so closely with us over the past several months to put in place our proposed permit with all the documentation and everything. First thing I want to emphasize is that, the installation of a grease separator is a COD public utility requirement. It's designed to protect the public sewer system, the public interest, from grease buildup from dishwashing water. COD requires them to be outside, preferably on site, but recognizes that in some cases they may have to be installed on public property or inside the building. You have an excerpt from COD's regulations to that effect that I provided via email today. And that's because there was another comment today that provided some COD excerpt, but it left out an important part, which is right after saying all new construction for restaurants shall have grease interceptors and they are not allowed within the public right of way. The COD's regs read, if this is found to be unworkable, the owner must apply to the city of Carmel for an encroachment within the public right of way. So COD fully recognized that there may be circumstances where this is definitely appropriate. And county health also regulates restaurants and enforces state regulations that state and I quote, "A grease interceptor shall not be located in a food or utensil handling area unless specifically approved by the enforcement agency." Again, I provided an excerpt, just one-page excerpt from the state law, which is as of January 1, 2020. And COGS regulations were updated most recently in 2019. So these are fairly new, updated regulations that we had to deal with as a new, essentially a new restaurant, a renovation, and that may be required for any other future restaurant renovations. Unfortunately, I mean, I would prefer not to be here today because I wish we had an ideal location on site, but we have no on-site location that fully satisfies both COGS and the county health's requirements. We have no on-site outdoor location that can be gravity fed, as our site slopes down from east to west, and the restaurant is at the far western property line. That's where water goes. We have no on-site indoor location that is outside our food and utensil handling areas. Really, it's the restaurant and the kitchen, both of which fall under that state category that you can't put a grease intercept there. The only location that works to satisfy the primary requirements of both COD and county health is the site we visited today during the field trip. In fact, in our unique case, it's the ideal location. It's gravity fed. It's parallel to our existing sewer connection to COD's main line in San Carlos Street. It's directly adjacent to San Carlos Street, so no clean out hose ever has to cross or block the public sidewalk. And it's underground, hidden by a brick cover matching the adjacent sidewalk with no impact on the public's use of the area above ground. Given all of these special circumstances, we followed the city's existing encroachment regulatory process and reached a final agreement with staff, including planning, public works, and environmental health, on an encroachment permit that would allow us to place the COD required separator in this location at no cost and really no risk to the city. The agreement includes a robust maintenance program, as you heard, an indemnity to protect the city in perpetuity from any risks or costs, insurance, and other benefits to the city in the form of new landscaping and sidewalk improvements we would undertake. I have heard some talk that the city is getting us out of a jam or granting us a special favor, and honestly, I don't know where that comes from. I personally think it's kind of nonsensical, because what we are trying to do is to comply with an important public utility health and safety requirement in a way that makes the most sense and has the greatest good for everyone: COD, Monterey County Health, the city, and of course ourselves. I've also heard a lot of talk. We've talked about precedent, but just so you know, this is not uncommon in other cities. I've spoken with the public official in charge of grease interceptors at the city of Monterey, and he said they have granted encroachment permits in circumstances like ours, and they have never had an issue with one, and they've been in the city public way for quite a number of years. Similarly, I spoke with the Pacific Grove official who also said he would approve, I explained our situation, he would approve an encroachment in circumstances such as ours. And we've researched, and a lot of other cities have this in their code. Rather than us setting a bad precedent, I think we are setting the right precedent, that the city will work with local restaurants to do what is best for public health when the circumstances warrant. I don't think you will ever find a situation where it's warranted more than ours. So I think we're setting a high bar for what you'd have to do in the future to meet the requirements for an encroachment permit. My last point is I believe the city wants to encourage new investment in our business infrastructure. I have two young, enthusiastic tenants, Michael and Caroline Chang, who will operate the restaurant. And they're putting their minds, bodies, and souls, as well as their pocketbooks, into opening a fine new dining restaurant that is exactly the type of restaurant the city wants here. One focused on Monterey Bay cuisine and all the wonderful bounty that our county has. Do we really want to send a message to them and other future businesses that the city is unwilling to be flexible and supportive when necessary in the interest of public health and to comply with other regulatory requirements such as COGS and county health? I don't think that's the case. I sure hope not, but I did want to end with that point. So I want to thank you for your consideration and again, your time today. I think everyone understands physically what is involved here. And I'm happy at this point to answer any questions that the city council may have, and otherwise I will reserve the remainder of my time for any necessary rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. You have 3 minutes and 45 seconds, I think it is. So is there any questions of Mark by the council members before I open up for public comment? I don't see anybody. All right, we'll open up for the public to comment. Is anybody wishing to speak to this item tonight? Again, is there anybody in the public wishing to speak to this item tonight? Carolyn Hardy looks to have her hand up, Ashley, I think.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time to speak. From all the comments that staff are making, I can see that you're trying to address a lot of the points that I made in an email to all of you. And there's a lot of emphasis on the maintenance agreement, but for me, that's kind of a Band-Aid approach. I think what is the most important and the most compelling argument to deny this encroachment application is the precedence this sets for opening up a lot of other restaurants to move their grease interceptors out into the right-of-way. And this is a lot different than just a simple sewer lateral. And the restaurant owner or the property owner had even not recognized that this would have been a first to occur in Carmel. And at that time, he said to the COD general manager that they might have to retreat and find a location within the restaurant. And what I found when I toured was I found a big hole in the ground in the kitchen that would, he said, would be his plan B if you denied the encroachment. And that hole in the ground could become a vault similar to a basement that would hold this grease interceptor. To put it out in the right of way, it becomes an impediment to any future utilities that might need to be run out in the street. And there was a time we never expected, cable TV and fiber optics to be out there, but they are today. So we don't know what the future might hold. And I don't think you want grease interceptors all over the city in the right of way. I think in studying the site plans, there were tremendous errors in the mechanical engineer's drawings, and I think you should pursue those problems. The way the grease interceptor was hooked up on San Carlos, it was connected to the line coming from the bathroom, and I don't think you want to risk having feces in your grease interceptors. And on another note, COD does not want dishwashers hooked up to grease interceptors for fear of all the hot water rushing, melting the grease out and running it into the storm drains. So there really is no place on the sidewalk to vent this thing. It requires venting, and it requires two-way cleanouts on both sides of the interceptor. And there's plenty of reasons to deny this encroachment because he can put it on site. It's very common to do. They're designed to be, that can be put inside somewhere. It doesn't have to take up kitchen space. So I'm asking you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Appreciate testimony. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Mayor Potter, Rich Pepe here.
Rich, go right ahead.
Well, at the risk of throwing in a kink to our good friend, the Stillwells, I would think a question that needs to be asked. Well, first of all, let me say, I don't have to agree with Carolyn Hardy that this could set a precedent. I mean, I've got 3 locations where my grease traps are inside, taking up valuable space. I know exactly where they are. They're right under the sink. I think the question would have to be asked, and Carolyn mentioned there was a hole in the ground. That's probably where the old grease trap was, because the restaurant that was there previously must have had a grease trap somewhere inside. This COD requirement is nothing new. We've had grease traps in town for, I don't know, decades. So where was the old grease trap, I'd have to ask if I was up there with you on the podium there. And gosh,
No, I've got my earbud in. Don't worry. You're 100% correct.
Anthony, go right ahead, Rich.
oh, thank you. Gosh, on the other hand, I'd like to support this because, gosh, if I can get my grease traps out in the public right of way and create some more space inside, wouldn't that be wonderful? So I really think that that's a question that should be asked. Where was the old grease trap, and could it go back exactly where it was? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Mayor, I saw that Steve Dallas had his hand raised earlier. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, good evening, Steve Dallas, resident of Carmel-by-the-Sea. As was stated by your staff, as well as I think Mr. Stillwell, this will be the first and only grease trap on public right-of-way. It would be the first also in all the COD district. Agreements fall through the cracks, as all of you know, and just witnessed on 8th Avenue. Maintenance agreements come and go. Our employees and our staff come and go. Even our own employees has said there's risk to the city. Under 12.08.060, number 2, number 3, and number 5, there's no way that that could be met. I have seen no laws about grease traps inside COD or at the state level. I'd like to reiterate what Councilmember Hardy said from some longtime employees of the city of Carmel, Rob Culver. We don't want a grease trap that is so close to the gutter and storm drain. I'm concerned about a potential backup and spill. From Agnes, from COD, I would recommend against allowing a grease trap to be installed in the public right-of-way under a sidewalk. Also from Ray DeCampo, I believe, on Campo. They also agreed from COD not to put it in the sidewalk area. And I understand what Bob is saying now, but he's our public director and he says, whoa, Public Works already rejected this application. Again, you have to think it's not just gonna last our lifetime, folks. It's gonna last the lifetime of your kids and grandkids. And as Rich Pepe just said, we've got all the restaurateurs on tonight on this call. I'll guarantee you they're gonna be knocking on your door if this gets approved tonight to move those grease traps into the public right-of-way throughout the city. Mr. Steelwell has plenty of room, whether it's gravity fed or not gravity fed. He's got 8 legal lots of record. People say that there's no room to the east. There's a whole garbage container. You could put it right under the garbage containers that are right there and not disturb the trees. It's well outside the 6-foot radius. I would urge you to deny this application and have Mr. Stillwell, as he so quoted himself, to put it inside his own restaurant where everything has been torn up and redone to begin with. I would hope you'd look to the future, not just to the present, and keep the applicant out of it, but future applicants and other people in the future that can make the same mistake and ruin the city of Carmel-by-the-Sea. Only one spill, that's all it's gonna take to really make damage. Thank you very much, Mayor Potter, council members.
Thank you, Mr. Dallas. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
I don't see any other hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
Victoria Beach looks like she might have her hand up.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay, I unmuted. Thank you. Nice to see everybody. I wanted to echo some of the things that have already been said. I had it's hard not to think of last month's encroachment discussion, where we have learned that how difficult it is to actually monitor encroachments, even ones that have nothing to do with public health. We know that staff is pressed, that we don't have enough staff to, at least at this moment, hopefully in the future, as soon as possible, to do the annual reviews and renewals and regulation enforcements of encroachments that are just about plants and sprinklers and things like that. And this one is, of course, much more serious. So it sounds to me like this maintenance agreement, I like insurance, but the maintenance agreement and even making an insurance claim, should it come to that, is almost like a life sentence of labor for our public servants. That concerns me because it's attaching labor to a physical object in perpetuity. I also think I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around how this isn't something that could be replicated everywhere, unlike what the applicant said, because there's strange topography all over Carmel, as we know. This is not a situation of any kind of property qualities of hardship, like you might think about in sort of the mentality of a variance. It's 33,000 square feet. Lot with and in contrast to that, we have Carmel, which actually the public right-of-way is extremely tight. Compared to other cities, we can talk about them all day long. We have teeny sidewalks and teeny streets, and really a lot of constraints. And this is a lot with very few constraints and topography that we see all over town. So it just strikes me that we have not exhausted all the other options, and that even the idea, of course, indoors may be worse than outdoors, and gravity may be better than non-gravity, but there are manual and hand-driven overrides for pumps. I don't think that a pump is a deal breaker, and I just think that all this raises, again, the question of the sanctity of the public right-of-ways for future use, and for a very much needed policy review, which I want to echo and thank Chip Rearig for mentioning at the beginning of the session. I really think we ought to get to that as soon as possible, so we do not have to be in this conversation repeatedly as a reactive stance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria. Is there anybody else? Ashley, what do you think?
I think you can close public comment. I don't see anybody trying to unmute and no other raised hands.
Rebuttal, right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to close the public comment period. Mark, you have 3 minutes and 48 seconds, I think, for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mayor Potter, council members. Couple of direct points on Ms. Hardy's comment about dishwashers. That is actually correct, but we don't have any dishwashers connected to the grease interceptor. It's just the rinse sinks where you rinse off all the residue from plates and things like that are connected. So that is not a concern. Ms. Hardy had a number of other concerns that were in a fairly detailed email from her to you late last night, which I had a chance to review today, and I provided you with a point-by-point response on each of those items. I think a number of them are easily addressed, and the others are what we're talking about today as to precedent and things like that. With respect to Mr. Pepe, I understand that the restaurant did have a grease trap is different from a grease interceptor. The grease traps are the old, smaller, under sink grease separators that used to be allowable, but with a major restaurant remodel, we're subject to all the new requirements of COD. Hence, we have to upgrade and install a gravity-fed passive grease interceptor, which is much larger and collects all of the lines from the sinks into one location, and it's much easier to maintain, and it's all in one location, and it's just the rule of the future. It's something we had to deal with. All the existing restaurants in town are basically grandfathered, and unless they undertake a major remodel, they aren't required to upgrade this. And again, a lot of restaurants, a few of the new ones I spoke with, they happen to have on-site locations that work. If they had to, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I agree, but that's why this request has been made. We don't fit into the normal circumstance where we might have property that could be gravity-fed, where we could install it and maintain it on our own property. We put it right next to where our existing sewer connection and our existing sewer clean out both go through the public right of way. So and we showed you that today during the field trip. So I don't think you're going to get a flood of these. They are very, very expensive to install. I would estimate this one's going to cost, I don't know, $15,000. So I don't see people putting their hands up and saying, I want to go through this process and prove to the city that, that an outside location in the public right of way is necessary and spend that kind of money without being required to. And I think that's really, the precedent issue. The idea of we can't install a pump. Pumps don't work all the time, and we would have to have a continuously running pump for dishwater. It's compared to sewage, which this doesn't connect with until after it's cleaned. It's a benign use. And if you think about it, what we're trying to do is to keep the true sewer system from being clogged up. So by doing this, we are advancing a greater good, which is to make sure that the sewer system with the true raw sewage doesn't get gummed up by grease from a restaurant. And that's a much greater risk to the city if that happened somewhere where a sewer line got clogged up and spilled out versus some dishwater that might have a little grease in it. So that concludes my response. If you have any other comments, I'm happy to address them.
Thank you, Mark. Staff, do you have any closing comments before I bring it back to council for comments and questions?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All righty. Council members, your thoughts, questions, comments? I guess I'll kick it off if you'd like. I think that one of the things that's compelling for me is if you look at California Retail Food Code, effective January 21 of 2020, says under 114201, A, if provided, a grease trap or grease interceptor shall not be located in a food or utensil handling area unless specifically approved by the enforcement agency. Grease traps and grease interceptors shall be easily accessible for servicing. What I heard from some of those that testified was that in their facilities, they're not readily accessible, and if they would, they'd like to move outside. I think, though, the statement was made that it would be a major remodel, which is what is going on with this property, that would necessitate that change in condition. I don't think it's a precedent I think it's dangerous. I think it's a precedent that's actually a better one if we go ahead and make sure that it's conditioned correctly. If you look at the conditions that we put on many projects, they're only good as the compliance that goes behind it and the enforcement that's there. I can't remember a project ever that came before me that didn't have some sort of condition compliance associated with it, along with the indemnification clause that's included and the fact that that's ongoing. I'm not even worried that staff's not going to go ahead and be able to enforce these conditions. I think the monitoring that Karen asked for is good. I think that's what we're going to have, is a tickler file that'll go ahead and alert us to when we don't pay our TOT, we don't go ahead and pay our taxes, when we don't go ahead and comply with the conditions that are there, whether it's reforestation or whether it's a grease trap. I really think that those are the conditions that we need to enforce. For that reason, I'm willing to take this as a precedent setter, but a good precedent. I don't think it's a bad precedent at all. I comment. Others? Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. I'll go second. I agree with most of what you said, Dave. I think this is, we've heard that these things are preferred to be outside. Mr. Stillwell remarked that this is the rule of the future, and I tend to think that that's true. But my question here is, what's going to happen when we have, I'd prefer not to set this precedent unless we're prepared to move it forward with, have this be a precedent that we can apply to all the restaurants in town. And my question is, what's going to happen when, just to pull a well-known one out of the air, Demetra remodels their kitchen? Where is their grease interceptor going to go? Or they're on a corner, so maybe that's a bad example. But where's Pangea's grease interceptor going to go? Is it going to go? Are we going to make them put it inside the restaurant, or are we going to have it? Is that going to be sort of on the edge of the street or in a parking lot, on Ocean Avenue? Is that a road that we as a city are prepared to go down? And, so I agree with what you said, but I'm having trouble making the leap to what we're going to do about the other 55 restaurants in town, and whether we're really prepared to move this precedent forward.
So Chip, I'm not staff, but I could just answer what I would think would be the case. So those would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Honestly, maybe they're not going to work, but if you remember on the field trip today, I think this is what we're talking about, maybe 6 or 8 feet from the building, which has a 0 setback anyway, to the street, and then it's a brick, so it's not that hard to move. I think one of the things I saw the other day, I happened to walk by when that photo was taken, not when the photo was taken, but I happened to be walking by the Portobello's the other day when that was being pumped out. It's a disgusting process. It was ugly, and it was also a hazard. So, I mean, I really did not feel very safe walking by that site with that slippery, greasy hose draped across the public right of way. But staff, please, Brandon, Chip, what do you think? Bob, to the issue of, is this going to be allowing anybody anywhere in town to go ahead and put a public grease interceptor in the public right of way?
Yeah, let me jump in again. I think I said this at the beginning. I think there are some unique circumstances with this property that allow you to create findings through which this will not be a universal truth, that everyone can put their grease interceptor in the right of way. So, and that's part of the basis through which we'll evaluate future similar applications. So I mean, I hear what Mr. Barron is saying, but I'm not overly concerned that we're going to see a flood of applicants wanting to put their interceptor in, in the right of way.
I think, since I asked the question, I think the problem I have, Chip, with what you're saying is that this is a situation where we have an alternative. It's not a pretty alternative at all. And I'll stipulate to that, but there is an alternative that the applicant has to do this. And I'm not sure that, for me yet, I'm not sure that there's enough. I'm not sure that I'm ready to, and I'm not sure, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm not sure that I'm ready to quite yet set this precedent in terms of, because I do think that once we do this, I do think that, Mr. Pepe spoke, and I think that he, obviously he has grease traps under his sinks. And I think that he will eventually be facing the same issue with Vesuvio and Napoli. And Napoli is on a pretty congested corner. So where is his grease trap going to go? Why would he not have the same rights as Mr. Stillwell when he renovates his kitchen to ask that his grease trap be put on Dolores? Whereas there isn't a median strip, there are tree cutouts, so it's a solid sidewalk, just like Ocean. It's a solid sidewalk followed by a street, and so I'm having a hard time, and there are a number of restaurants in town, and certainly most of the ones in sort of the core commercial area that have this same situation. And if what I'm hearing is, if we're not able to, if you're going to tell me, if Chip, in a hypothetical question, if you're going to tell me that there's no restaurant on Ocean Avenue that would be allowed to have a grease interceptor, in that median, and there's no there's no restaurant on Dolores, to use the second example, that's going to be allowed to have a grease interceptor in the street, then I'm going to have a hard time with this one. If you think that there's a path forward for some of those restaurants, then I would feel better about it. But right now, and I appreciate the difficulty that Mr. Stillwell is having, but he has an easier time than most of the restaurants in town. And so I'm having a difficult time seeing a path forward for the city. I agree that it's a precedent. I agree with Dave that this is something we should explore, but I'm having a hard time seeing that path sitting here on the dais right now without sending it back to staff and saying, come up with the path forward. So right now, that's where I am. And yeah.
There was a question in there 45 seconds ago, sir, and I think it was something to the effect of, would other restaurants have the same ability to approach this grease trap issue the same way? And again, my response, as I think all Bob and Brandon and I all started, Potentially, absolutely potentially. If there are the similar set of unique circumstances, what happens with us most often is we run into tree roots. And trees become the sacrificial lamb. Let's face it. It's not for better. It's for worse. The trees are impacted. It happens all the time. The tree roots are cut, and the tree goes away, and we don't get a substantial tree back in its place. So in this case, I looked at the cypress to the east of the property. Yes, they're a little bit farther away than Mayor Dallas referenced from where the trash enclosure is going, but cypress roots are. They're pretty shallow, and they spread out pretty widely. I would hate to see those trees impacted because they're so significant. I would hate to see a cut that travels to Fifth Avenue, potentially through the root zone. Our street trees are usually in smaller planters. There could be less of an impact to a street tree. That said, I can't tell you right now, sir, how many restaurants we would be theoretically or potentially supportive of a similar approach. That said, they're probably out there. They certainly are. I appreciate the extra effort that Mr. Stillwell is proposing. I would not support someone obligating us to replace a sidewalk or repair a sidewalk. He, like Mr. Pepe, has met us halfway and is doing work in the right of way in a public-private partnership kind of a stance. So again, there's a set of unique circumstances that I think facilitate your review of this application and your potential to approve it.
Bob, did you want to say something?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just real quick, on these other restaurants that have physically no place to put grease interceptors, they're going to have to apply for waivers from the state or from COD. That's going to be the only option they have. And if they're denied those waivers, then they might be restricted to renovate.
Yeah, and my response to that would be, you'll appreciate that, if we're unwilling to extend this privilege to, the half of the restaurants in town that are on Ocean or Dolores or 6th Avenue, someplace where there isn't a sort of a convenient planted median to put a grease interceptor, then I'm going to have a hard time with this one. Because this really does seem like, we've had this discussion over and over again about the parklets and the wine tasting rooms, restaurants that are on the street versus restaurants that are off the street. And it's just a sort of a luck of the draw function of where they are. And maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the reasoning we should apply here too. And just leave Mr. Stillwell with the property that he has and the property that he has purchased, and not give him this option and put him on a level playing field with the half of the 55 other restaurants in town that won't have the same opportunity. Thank you, Dave.
Other comments by council members?
Yes, I have a question. So let's just say we go ahead and do this, and it does set a precedent. And then we have other restaurants come forward and want to move their grease trap out. We already have limited space for street trees as it is. And how many cases running into existing street trees or places for new street trees? And how would it impact the trees that we already have? Because as you notice, we have a very difficult time with our street trees downtown in the small squares they're in, with all the utilities, the public utilities that are in the street. So I do have a concern about that and setting a precedent for this. It's difficult. I also have sympathy for Mr. Stillwell and the new restaurant owners. That they may need to go to the health department and ask for a waiver. And I can certainly understand why in the future the health department would prefer that the grease traps be outside. But I am troubled. Earlier, Bob said this is the least worst case. And that's a little troubling too, because we did have, in Carolyn Hardy's letter, there were references to staff being concerned. I don't know if the staff's concerns, all three staff members that expressed those concerns, if their concerns were met. Maybe you could speak to that, Bob. That was Anya's being concerned, Rob Culver, and then you too.
Well, I think those prior emails are a little bit out of context. That's well before there was any discussion about this maintenance and operations agreement. That was when we first found out about the desire to put a grease interceptor, which, by the way, is much larger than a grease trap. A grease interceptor, it captures fats, oils, and grease. So, but we just call it a grease interceptor for to be consistent. Again, those concerns were based on initial review, and then we talked to Brandon, and then that's where we got started on the going down the road with the operations and maintenance agreement. Without that agreement, there's, you know, I'd be pounded on the desk. But that's not the case. We have that agreement that we would have to enforce, and we will enforce.
Okay, but could you speak to the possibility in the future of trees that are already in the public right-of-way on smaller streets being impacted right in front of restaurants?
I think we have that concern well above and beyond this grease interceptor issue.
Well, if people were going to install grease interceptors at other restaurants where we only have small tree squares, I mean,
Council member,
right next to this potential one.
Council member, I understand your question, and I think that the potential to impact a street tree would be grounds for denial of a interceptor in the right of way. And you know, this is recorded, so you can look it up in the future, and that would necessitate a restaurant owner to obtain said variance through Monterey County Health. So again, our street trees seem to be the most sacrificial and easily thrown away. So I would not support a grease interceptor in the right of way that adversely impacted a street tree.
This project is actually intended to preserve the street trees, right? That's where the staff recommendation came from.
Yeah,
Karen, I'm
yes,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Okay, there was concern about the cypress trees at the back on along 5th Street. Would there be any wisdom in asking for some hand digging to figure out where the roots of those trees are to see if they can be avoided?
That could be imposed on the applicant. It's not impossible.
You guys know that grease interceptors don't have to be installed underground, correct?
Excuse me, Parker, you can't speak now. Excuse me, Ian Martin.
We could ask the applicant to hand dig around the cypress tree to see if it's feasible to put the grease interceptor on the east side of the building.
Just to add on to what Bob just said, if you recall, the east side still would require the pump as well, because that is uphill from the restaurant.
All right, Karen, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Bobby, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, Mayor, as you, I'm not opposed to precedent setting. I think that if precedent setting is something that we can do, that's a positive thing if it's a good precedent. And just because a precedent is set doesn't mean every other project gets a green light. So by having the applicant not negatively impact any street trees, by having the applicant beautify the street, by having the applicant making the applicant's restaurant healthier and safer for employees and guests, all these things lend me to say, yeah, we should allow this. And the precedent, if a precedent is set, then a precedent is set. And it's still on a case-by-case basis. It still has to go to Planning Commission, and these other things have to be met. But at least anybody that applies for this will know that they'll have to adhere to certain rules that we're going to lay out partially tonight.
All right, is there any other discussion? guess the thing to do then is to frame it around a motion. I'll go ahead and make a motion. I'd move to approve. I move approval of a determination on an application EN 21-187 to install an underground grease interceptor in the public right-of-way between the sidewalk and the curb on the east side of San Carlos Street near the corner of 5th and 5th Avenue as conditioned.
I'll second it.
Under discussion on the motion, guys? Oh, Jeff.
Yeah, right now, I hear what, Dave, I hear what you and Bobby are saying, and I agree that this is I think that this is a direction that we need to go, but right now, I don't see that direction laid out. And I think that I don't see how to get there. I don't yet see that we're setting a precedent that, Bobby, to address your, I see that we're setting a precedent, but it looks like we're only going to have 2 restaurants in town that are able to meet, Karen Street conditions and the fact that there's not a median on Ocean or Dolores and all these other things. And I don't see that this is going to be equitable in terms of the application of the precedent. So right now I will be voting no.
2-2 tie is a fail.
Can I?
Just for clarification.
Mayor, can I comment on that? So it's a little bit, I'm a little bit surprised by that, Mr. Barron, because of I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words with what I want to say about restaurants in the future. Like what we're going to have to deal with trash cans. At my house, I'm going to have a 3rd trash can, which I don't have room for. And so for us to say that we're not going to allow the right-of-way at all ever, I think is short-sighted, because who knows what these agencies are going to do in the future. And they may come back and have restaurants like Vesuvio say, you know what, if you don't change out that grease trap underneath the sink, we're going to shut you down, or you're going to have to do a major reconstruction in there, or whatever it's going to take. Like, I think we need to be forward thinking on what it's going to take to satisfy these new EPA rules and all the different things that come out of these agencies. And so I would like to see us look a little bit more into the future about how we can best make these restaurants safer, cleaner, healthier, and also deal with the grease and whatever comes out of those restaurants. So,
Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby, for your comments. And I agree with all that you said. I do agree with that. I just don't think that this hearing is a good start to that process. I think Mr. Stillwell has an alternative as unpalatable as it is in the short term. And I think that one of the things that goes through my mind, and I'm sorry, Dave, I'm going to take up 30 seconds by saying this. One of the things that goes through my mind is I think it's just it's bad policy to set policy in the middle of a permit discussion. And so I would wholeheartedly support moving forward on a discussion of how to address sort of the grease interceptor issue. But I think that the solution that the city needs is a solution that can be used by, as I keep saying, the restaurants on Ocean and the restaurants on Dolores and the restaurants on the other avenues that are constricted. And my concern is that we haven't done that at this, we're not in a position to do that here. We're sort of, we're setting some conditions for Mr. Stillwell, and this is all fine, but I don't think that this hearing is going to move us forward to, this hearing is not going to move us forward to that policy. And that's the thing that concerns me, that it may be in the wrong direction.
Bobby and Karen.
Sorry, would you like me to let Karen go first, Mayor?
Yeah, why don't we? Yeah, Karen.
I'm wondering if we should explore maybe a different motion that would ask the applicant to do this hand digging, and if it comes back that it would be terribly detrimental to those cypress trees, then we would look again at putting the clean out to the front. If it's possible to put it at the back, even with a pump, and not damage those trees, I think that would be my preferred solution to this. I am concerned about the trees, but we don't know that there are root systems there. That is just a supposition. So maybe that would be a more satisfactory way to go, is to ask the applicant to do that hand digging and come back to us with that information.
That's a question to the applicant, I think, Mark.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
We can't, we're not going to connect a restaurant system to a pump for a variety of reasons. I just don't, it's not reliable. If it fails, it all backs up into the kitchen. You got to shut down. It's not, talk about precedent setting. It's really a negative precedent to even explore that. So I think from the city's, if the city doesn't think that we meet the criteria already in your encroachment permit ordinance, and we went through each one, and circumstances are unique, but if that's the case, then our only alternative, unfortunately, will be to put it in the kitchen. And hope that that county health, and I will support that. But you're going to run into this issue again. It's just, I thought we did everything that that your ordinance said we had to do to qualify, and if in your judgment we don't, then we're not pumping. So exploring the roots is a non-starter, because it just doesn't work to install a pump for all the reasons I stated. We got to have gravity flow, and all
Bobby, then Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This reminds me a lot of the time that Mr. Fink wanted to add a trash enclosure into the park. And there was a lot of debate around that. And ultimately, we allowed it. And whether it was precedent setting at the time or not, it was allowed. And I don't think that we've had any real problems with people wanting to encroach on public property to put their trash cans since then. Now, if we did, I guess they would come back and say, yeah, well, you let Mr. Fink do it. But in fact, we did. I think the problem was solved. We haven't heard a peep about it. And this reminds me of that situation. And so I think the council at the time made a good decision back then. And I really hope that we can make a good decision now and allow this.
I have another question, please. So,
excuse me, Jeff had his hand up, Karen.
Yeah, so Chip, isn't there something in the encroachment applications to what Mr. Stillwell said about setting a precedent?
Brandon, what was the finding regarding precedent setting? Maybe you put that slide back up.
Yeah, I can actually put up the language itself from the code. I think that might be better.
Yeah, and I think maybe I can just save you I think that one of the things that we, to Mr. Stillwell's comment, I think that one of the things the council can consider in our approval of an encroachment is whether or not the encroachment sets a precedent. And I think that is a policy decision. So I would take a little bit of an issue with Mr. Stillwell's comment that he has satisfied all of the requirements, because I do think that that's our prerogative to make these sort of policy and precedent setting decisions. I will say, I'll commit that, if he doesn't get the permit tonight and the county says no, or COD says no to him having this permit inside, I would ask that he return, and I would be prepared to grant the permit, under these conditions, I would be prepared to grant the permit at that time. So it's not my intention to single-handedly close his restaurant, to not allow his restaurant to open. But I do think that, from my perspective, I think that that's my preferred route at this point.
Just, and what Councilman Barron, just so you can see it up on the screen here, it's number 2 of F. It says the encroachment shall not create, extend, or be reasonably likely to lead to an undesirable land use precedent.
Yeah, and I think when, I think that that's the thing that I'm having an issue with. And I think that, Chip brought this to the council for this reason. And so here I am. Thank you.
So I guess I would ask the council or staff, or the applicant, is there an interest in continuing this item? So Jeff, you could develop a stronger level of comfort with this. I mean, when we say precedent, and maybe I overemphasize that a little bit too much. I think that this is a project that does go outside the normal box. But if it is different, it's different in very unique circumstances, and it's conditioned accordingly. So my level of comfort is with the conditions that are on this and the unique circumstances. I don't know how many other properties are going to be able to come up with the same unique circumstances this property has. That's my issue.
Well,
Mark, go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff.
I haven't, to be honest, I mean, I haven't heard what Karen's feelings are on voting with the motion, and so maybe 3-1, and you may not have to deal with me, Dave. So that's maybe a thought. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. So maybe we should answer that question first before we answer the second question.
We're a team. I don't consider myself dealing with you, Jeff. Yeah, Karen.
I'd really like to approve this, but I really can't tonight. If I totally agree with what Jeff said. If the county says you can't do it, you shouldn't do it, come back to us and we will look at it again. But here we are again reacting to something rather than setting a policy out to begin with. Now we do have that encroachment language that says it shall not set a precedent. So that is the deciding factor for me.
So Dave, to answer the question that you asked before that, which is, should we come back the next month? I'll ask, I would defer that to, Chip and Brandon and Bob. Do you think that, the three of you in consultation with me or some other council member could come up with, make me feel comfortable that this wasn't going to be, that some of the other restaurants I mentioned that are on Ocean or Dolores would have the opportunity to avail themselves of this right? Like, do you think it's possible for us, in the course of the next 4 weeks, that you could make me comfortable and we could bring some verbiage back to the council for consideration or, to review as sort of the first part of this precedent setting path? If you don't think that's possible, then we should just turn it down. If you think that that's possible, then, I'd be willing to give it a go over the course of the next 4 weeks and see if we could get there.
I think, though, in the question and answer, we should ask the applicant if he can go ahead and delay that project that much longer. I mean, we were in that building today. Looks to me like they're getting ready to close up walls. So I want to ask Mark first and then go to the staff.
It's a tough call. We already delayed it. We had gone down the road, as I think some of you know, based on our staff discussion. We've already internally installed the grease interceptor line all the way to the western wall, and we left that hole just in case, because it happened sort of at the end of our planning process. So we were ready to go install it and continue with construction. We've kind of been holding off, and we couldn't get it on the October agenda. We had almost wait 2 months to get it on this agenda. So I just it's an undesirable solution to put it in a kitchen anyway, in a high-end restaurant. But if we are given permission by county health and COD, it's feasible. I've been very clear about that. I just think it's setting a bad precedent for the city to trigger that. But I don't think we want to. I've got the Changs are here with me, listening to this as newcomers to the planning process here. So what do you want to?
You can talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, they're willing to defer, and we're willing to then. They say that would give us time to go to county health and see if they will allow it. We haven't put it to them yet. The county health thought we were putting it outside. COD thought we were putting it outside. I did have the president of COD here, the former Mayor Carmel, and he was perfectly fine with the location, but if the
For
city
the
council,
record, that is the voice of Mr. Chang.
Mr. Mayor,
yeah, they're here. So just go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, to move this along, I can commit to Mr. Barron 100% that we can go for a walk, Brandon and Bob and I and Mr. Barron, and look at other opportunities and address.
Yeah, I'm going to need more than no offense, Chip. I'm going to need more than a walk. I'm going to need, a little bit of work.
Yeah, a walk.
Pen to paper.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, a walk to begin with to look at the feasibility, and then we can work on developing language again that will act as findings for this and potentially future decisions of like kind.
So in the interest of moving this along, then I'll withdraw my motion. I think the seconder will take a substitute motion if you're just inclined to make one, Jeff, and a new motion.
Yeah, I would just move that we continue this until next month with a possible hopeful outcome, if that's okay with the applicant. I'm sorry, Mr. Stillwell.
That's acceptable.
That's where I am at this point.
That's acceptable.
And
Right.
I would like to have you come back with more information for me about what actually triggers for restaurants the requirement for this larger grease interceptor. Is it a simple remodel? Is it a major remodel? We need to know what we're looking at as the trigger point. Because
So I'll commit. So when I work with staff, I will commit to bring back an understanding of what that is. If that's acceptable with you, Karen.
yes.
All right, how about a motion then to continue to a date specific?
Yeah, so I would make a motion to continue this until next month's agenda, maybe on the Monday and not the Tuesday.
A motion, do we have a second? I'll second it. Okay, we have a motion with a second. Ashley, would you call a roll, please? Motion is to continue this item till the December meeting.
Councilmember Barron,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards,
Yes.
Mayor Potter. Thank you all.
Righty, that noted, we are going to take a 10-minute bio break. It is now, what time is it? It's 6:41. Why don't we return at 7 o'clock, I guess? Does that work? All right, 7 o'clock it is, guys.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Mute yourself, everybody.
They've taken a break until 7 o'clock and they only have
All right, and my clock says it's 7 o'clock. Does anybody else agree? All righty. So let's move on then to our next item, which is the number 5, which is consideration of extending the mandatory removal dates for temporary parklets and temporary outdoor seating beyond October 12th, 2021. That seems kind of redundant, but all righty. Brandon, would you like to tee this up? Unless you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was having a little bit of technical difficulty there. Sorry, my PowerPoint presentation.
Brandon, just for clarification, for my edification, could you, I mean, I thought we already said we were going to not to allow reconstruction of wine tasting parklets, and we decided to continue wine tasting in private outdoor spaces was going to be bifurcated from this discussion. We're actually going to have that as a separate action item moving forward to allow them to have outside dining, outside tasting in the areas attached to their properties.
Yeah, that's true, Mr. Mayor. I left it on there because until such a time that there's actual, policy work and code change with respect to the outdoor tasting, they still are underneath the guise of the temporary authorization under this emergency ordinance. So I apologize if I misunderstood that, but I thought you were speaking to in the future when we actually want to pursue amendment of that policy, that it would be a separate item from the permanent outdoor seating, because as it is right now, we have zoning codes and a wine tasting policy approved by the city council that have certain requirements right now that are only allowed to be usurped in the fact that we have an emergency ordinance in place.
But allow reconstruction of wine tasting parklets. I'm reading from your overview in advance of your present. I'm just trying to get the wine people to calm down a little bit in case they think they're back on the agenda for some reason.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, it is the wine tasting shops being able to have outdoor seating is something that's allowed right now underneath the emergency ordinance through Chip's powers as city administrator that are granted to him underneath an emergency ordinance. So I think
but the parklets issue we'd killed. I thought we'd kind of taken the parklets issue for wine tasting off the agenda.
No, I think, I mean, we can, but once at some point the city council will have to, if the emergency ordinance goes away at some point in the future, at that point, wine tasting would not be allowed to take place outdoors unless there was a policy change that the city council approved on its own track. So I thought it was appropriate to keep that at least on the radar so that if one goes away, we're aware that one will remain on its own.
Okay, all right. Sorry to delay the process. Let's go.
That's okay. I know that there was some conversation about that last time, so I apologize if I was confused about what we were doing there.
All right.
Bring on my PowerPoint here. All right. Everybody see that in full screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So good evening, Brandon Swanson, Community Planning and Building, here to discuss consideration of extending the temporary outdoor seating in the public right of way. Just a quick overview. This is going to be a short presentation. Really, the consideration is to extend the parklet removal date currently set for November 12th. If it's a yes, how long? Would we allow restaurants that have had their parklets removed to rebuild, allow reconstruction of wine tasting parklets, and continue wine tasting in private outdoor spaces, the discussion we just had. In the previous 30 days, the October 5th City Council meeting, there wasn't a 30-day extension granted out to November 12th. The $842 monthly fee remained in place. The City Council determined to allow wine tasting in private spaces to continue, but not to rebuild wine tasting parklets. There are still 26 parklets remaining. That was the same number we had last time. However, one parklet did reduce to a single space instead of two. The all October rental fees were paid on time for a total of $39,574, which is slightly down from the one before because a parklet went from 2 spaces to 1. So the direction staff is looking for tonight is, should the parklet removal date of October 12th be extended? If yes, how long should the extension be? Should any restaurants that remove their parklets be allowed to rebuild if they choose? should the wine tasting shops be allowed to continue serving in the private outdoor spaces, and should wine tasting shops be allowed to rebuild parklets. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I will conclude my presentation and am available for any questions.
So Brandon, under questions, what is the status of the ordinance that the masking ordinance, which was handed down recently? I think that's the changed circumstances we discussed extensively at the last meeting, but that has kind of changed the climate of decision-making in my mind.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that's a great question. So because of the levels that we are at right now in the county, the mask ordinance will go into effect on Friday the 5th. And there's a specific language in there, and I do have the ordinance available if we need it, but there's a piece of language in the ordinance that talks about effective date and termination. And in simple terms, once the ordinance is in effect, and it's in effect because we've gone to that substantial or high level, when the county comes out of that substantial or high level, there is still 30 days. So let's say, for example, on Friday, we go into the mask mandate. Monday, if the level changes and we can go back to not having a mask mandate, there's still 30 days of the mask mandate. So it's like a 30-day grace period where the mask mandate remains in place even after we drop out of that level. However, the Board of Supervisors can cancel that if they choose to upon order. But typically what we're looking at is 30 days, even from when we go back to the safer tiers that the county has talked about.
And Brandon, if I can continue my questioning prematurely here ahead of my council members. So let's say you drop out of we drop out of the tier for a while, and then do we go back? What if we go back in again? I'm confused on that.
So if we were to go back into one of the tiers during that 30-day grace period, it would turn back on. The 30-day grace.
Start the clock over again with another 30.
That's correct. When you came out of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry, guys. All right. Other questions to Brandon by council members? All right. Karen.
Now, can you answer the mask mandate is for indoor spaces like stores. However, it is not for during eating. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. I'm looking at the ordinance right now, seeing if I can find the actual language.
My experience when I was in Napa and Sonoma a couple of weeks ago was that if you were drinking, you could have a sip, but then you had to put your mask back on. If you were constantly chewing and eating, you could keep it off. But if you were drinking, you had to keep it on between sips, which was incredibly annoying, frankly. And I was not that I was drinking that much. It was just, I noticed a lot of other people upset.
I can read you the section. It's section 2 of the ordinance, and it talks about all times indoors except in your own residence or in a closed room, office, or vehicle, along with members of their household, when they are performing an activity that cannot be done while wearing a face covering. Example, eating or drinking, swimming or showering in a fitness facility, or obtaining a medical or cosmetic service. As specifically exempted from the use of face coverings under the guidance of CDPH, and when attending meetings and indoor gatherings with vaccinated and unvaccinated attendees, where all vaccinated persons present show proof of vaccination. Those are the 4 situations where a mask is not required indoors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any other questions by council members? I don't see them, but I'll open it up for public comment. I know that
Parker Logan
wanted to speak this item earlier. Parker, I'm going to give you some additional time because of the fact that you had something that was unrelated to this item, apparently, or unrelated to the parklet issue. So if that's the case, you can have 5 minutes, but if it's not, then go ahead and just take it the normal 3. I realize that's a little vague for you.
I appreciate the extra time. I'll try not to use it. I'm going to combine a couple things now because I've waited. But, you know, one thing for sure, we probably could have just scratched this whole item from the agenda in the first place using CHIP's emergency powers at will, because there is this new ordinance, and it's with good intentions because it was found necessary to protect life, health, and safety of our citizens, its businesses, and the community at large. And the provisions and the California Constitution, Article 6, Section 7 of the California Constitution requires you to take actions necessary to protect public health, welfare, and safety. And the provisions of the ordinance call out city managers and city attorneys, Chip, Brian, and the city council. You're requested to take further emergency actions to implement that intent and the purpose of this ordinance, which is, again, to protect life, health, and safety of our citizens and its businesses and the community at large. So where do we go from here? I mean, we shouldn't be talking about, are we going to extend them? Chip should say they're going to be extended, because now we've got a mask mandate, and yes, you cannot wear a mask if you're eating and drinking, but then you're putting yourself into a room with people without masks on, and that's what we know is unsafe. So outdoor dining and eating and drinking is something that needs to stay. I mean, it's the right thing to do. It's how you protect the health and the safety of our citizens, its businesses, and the community at large. Am I wrong? The ordinance also says it shall be liberally constructed to provide the broadest possible protection for the citizens. So in order to do that, I think that we'd have to continue to keep the parklets, and at this point, without any kind of payment or rental fee, because this is now not like a luxury where you're going to take our money and help clean up the city. This is something that we need to do to protect our citizens, its businesses, and the community at large. So Chip, Brian, City Council, you already know the answer that you have to give tonight, and that's to keep the parklets, let those who don't have them rebuild them. We're not going to vote to keep them for 30 days. We're going to keep them until we exhaust this new ordinance and go through that 30-day waiver period. And then we can go back and discuss if we need to vote to keep them or charge us for them, which at this point, with the necessary actions to protect public health, welfare, safety, our citizens, its businesses, and the community at large, you have to vote to keep them, wash the payments, and do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Parker. Appreciate it. All right, is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? If so, now's the time. I see a hand up there. Maybe Tim Toomey.
You better get up there.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Tim Toomey, representing the Carmel Residents Association once again. And the CRA board continues to support the removal of the parklets as we have in the past. But however, as you were saying earlier here, Mayor, we do support the wine tasting shops and the restaurants and private spaces, and we feel that should be a separate situation from the parklets. We're just concerned strictly with the street parklets in public spaces. So we understand you compelled to extend the temporary program this evening. And if so, we feel that it's to better manage expectations, we would really recommend that the City Council establishes an agreed upon criteria that will be set, that will help set the removal date for the restaurant parklets in public spaces. This will enable better advanced planning for all businesses in town. And that's something that we don't have right now is, an agreement and alignment among council members as to what the specific criteria is for, triggering this event. And as Parker mentioned, mask mandate, boom, now is in effect. And we can't be just looking at opinions on this. I think that, we really need to nail this down. What's it going to take? What metrics are we going to use, to try to get there? And then that way, we're not revisiting this every month. We've got the data, and we all agree, and we know it's either time to start thinking about removing them, or it's, the data is telling us that we need to keep them, until something happens. So, well, we'd really like you to consider that, and of course, within that framework, there will be situations that might come up that were not considered, and of course, you'll need to course correct as necessary. But that's our approach, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your time, Tim. I appreciate it. Next speaker.
Jack Galante, go ahead.
Jack, you're not going to share your clam dip recipe, are you?
Yeah, well, I'm doing this Zoom cooking show, and I was doing a couple things at once, like you do, Dave. So, but first, I want to say I believe Dave, happy birthday for tomorrow. I think coming up here, growing older but not up.
I hope I was going to get away with that.
But hey, I just wanted to say about the issue with the wine tasting rooms and the private spaces. What I think is, I understand, Brandon, what you're saying is that it's under the emergency order right now, and that's why you're keeping it in the same discussion, even though they are absolutely completely different issues. One is in private areas and one is in a public right of way, which have nothing to do with each other. The problem that I'm facing is that we've been looking at this now. We've been asking this for about, I think, 4 or 5 months. I can't remember, every month coming the same thing. And is there a way that, even if you want to leave that in this whole discussion during the emergency ordinance, is there a way that we can start the policy, the discussion to change the wine tasting room policy while we are going through the lengthy process of the general plan amendment? Is there a way that we can get that discussion on the table that we've been asking for month after month after month, to say, look, either allow or don't allow, hopefully allow the wine tasting rooms to use their private permitted spaces by the government, by the ABC, for their wine tastings, but and just start, and then as we go through it, and it can be a temporary basis as while we're going through the general plan amendment, so it can change during the general plan amendment or not, but at least it's there. We don't have to come back every single month and ask to do that, because the discussion of this policy has not even started, and we've been trying to get it started for month after month after month. So all I'm saying is, what is that timeline, and why can't we start that discussion? And thanks again, guys. I'll send you all the clam dip recipe. So enjoy, have a good glass of wine.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. Next speaker.
Hi, it's David Fink.
David, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, happy birthday tomorrow.
Yes.
Can't get away from it. We're in a really tough spot. I really appreciate Tim's comments from the Carmel Residents Association, but unfortunately, I don't think he's a restaurateur. And here's the situation. More than 50% of our guests are asking to eat outdoors. If we take away outdoor dining, it's going to affect our business. COVID is not going away. It's never going to go away. And it's gotten better, absolutely. But we have guests that still just don't want to eat inside. And unfortunately, as a restaurateur and hotelier, we are now the police. I mean, we've had confrontations with guests, and asking them to, please be safe. And it puts us in a really tough situation. So we need the outdoor dining. We really need to work on a permanent solution. And Mayor, I know you would like to, move that conversation forward. We all would. And something that would be attractive for Carmel that we could be proud of. And I do want to say I was in San Francisco last Friday night, and they have done such a good job in many of the city areas with their outdoor dining and their parklets. And Mayor London Breeze is quite supportive of the outdoor dining, and they're going to make it permanent, as well as New York City, Chicago, and some other big cities, as well as some small cities throughout California. So we want to keep it going. We want to find a permanent solution, but we need it for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy birthday.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for David. I appreciate it. Next speaker.
I see Cindy Lloyd has her hand up, Mr. Mayor.
Cindy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Cindy Lloyd, and I basically have the same message that I had last time, and I only do it so that I can get it on record, but that I find the parklets are, not all of the parklets, but the majority of the parklets interrupt the architectural ethic of Carmel, and it interrupts the sense of use of the sidewalks for pedestrians. The other day, I was walking through town and I was going up Ocean Avenue on the south side between Monteverdi and Dolores and on up to, and Dolores. And I had this sense that I was walking through the middle of a restaurant. I wasn't on the sidewalk. I mean, that's the first time I've walked through there. And it's, the wait staff was going back and forth and it was full of diners and everybody was having a good time. I felt as though I were an intruder. So I just want to weigh in and say I can really appreciate the people who want to eat outside. I can also appreciate the position of the restaurateurs. They do add a lot to our city, but I want to, as a resident, say that I would hope that they would be more compatible with the architecture of Carmel, and at some point they would go away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Richard Kreitman, I believe, is next in line.
Thank you, Mayor. My wife and I do not feel comfortable eating inside at this point. And so we appreciate, and I appreciate the parklets for the restaurants. And I know you've said in the past it gives the town a European ambiance. I don't believe that moving, I hate to say it, loud and obnoxious drunks out of the bars onto the street adds to our ambiance as a town. And another element of this is, for those of us who have businesses with parklets in front of us that we didn't approve of, nobody asked us when a parklet was put in front of my business, I would ask that you consider recalibrating the current situation to remove those. And especially for restaurants, which my neighbor, and he's a friend, my neighbor who has a lot of outdoor space of his own, Mulligan's, he has that whole patio in the back, that be considered, that at this point we remove the parklets that are in front of businesses who don't want them there. 2 weeks ago, we had some people from that come into, I had to call the Carmel PD to get some of the gentlemen who were drinking in front of our business, who came in to basically harass us, to ask them to get out of our galleries. So parklets themselves, as David said, COVID's not over, and it may never be over. So this is something I would like to see them all go away, but just for the flow of the town, but it's nothing I think we can do right now. We have to allow the restaurants to survive. And as I say, my wife and I, we don't feel comfortable eating indoors now. So we are patrons of the outdoor restaurants. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next speaker. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Let's not be shy. Kenny Spielvogel.
Mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I know this is such a painful discussion. I've talked to council and mayor and CRA members, and today I went around to retail, and there was a great majority of the people that were actually okay with having them. There were people that did not want them for retailers, but a good majority did. I was surprised, more than 50% wanted to have them remain. They thought that it brought business to town. They were happy to have the place, the parklets here. Right now, there's locals are being told that this is such a great retail season, holiday season in Carmel. Being here with a half a dozen restaurants that I've had Carmel Plaza, on Ocean Avenue, on other streets. This is not a great time for retail, and it never was. John Plastini has 47 leases, and he can tell you that it is not the best time of the year for retail. Parking is okay right now. Nobody's complaining when they come to a restaurant that they had to spend a huge amount of time finding parking. And I agree with Tim. We should come up with a process tonight, if it's possible, for the, for our exit strategy. But we do have a mask mandate. So what do we do? Do we have a period of time after they take away the mask mandate that we have X amount of time, which sounds like 30 days? I'm really not sure, but we should come up with something. And we should also talk about potentially having, not a hardcore end, but maybe we work out of it. We need to be reasonable about it. The restaurants have been great in the community during COVID. We've been here from the beginning. We've had to deal with a lot of stuff. I'm not saying financially it's been an imposition as much as, some people might say, but we've done a good job, and we should be given the respect as a major source of entertainment, food, dining for hotels and everything else in our community, with a little bit of ease out of this instead of, dramatic. We care. We really do care about the locals. We take care of the locals all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Next speaker. Hello. Ashley, what do you think?
Hey, Mr. Mayor, Anthony Carnazzo here.
Yeah, Anthony, the floor is yours.
Good evening, sir, and happy birthday to you as well. Could benefit from your many years of wisdom, no doubt.
Right.
I want to compliment everybody for speaking here this evening. I certainly agree with the other sentiments expressed by the other restaurant and bar owners. And in a way, I actually agree with a few of the residents that spoke as well, in the sense that the parklets could be improved and some degree of certainty about what the future looks like, I think would be beneficial for all parties. And to that point, I want to compliment the mayor and Brandon as well for the focus on the future and for their goal of potentially amending the general plan. I doubt that anyone, restaurant owners included, want to remain in a perpetual state of temporary uncertainty. However, now and for the foreseeable future, COVID is and will be a very serious issue. We regularly have guests who refuse to sit inside, having made a reservation, and are angry at me, in some cases have cursed me out, because I don't have outdoor dining. And these instances are such that, like, I'm trying to walk them to an empty indoor table that I have because I had a reservation, and they refuse to dine with us, get mad at me, and then walk away. Additionally, in business, when you don't have any certainty, you can't make sound financial decisions. And you might, I want to say this gently, there are some parklets which could use a degree of aesthetic improvement or safety improvement around town. But as a small business owner with very limited capital, as many of us are in that same situation, you can't take that limited capital and invest it in something that may or may not be forced to be torn down at your expense within a matter of a couple of weeks. So in that sense, I agree with some of the residents that spoke. If we are able to start to work towards some degree of a more predictable future, I think that would benefit all sides. And I think we can find common ground there. And I think Kenny mentioned the word not to jump out of something so quickly. If there is some degree of certainty, I think it will calm a lot of the voices of the residents, many of which are well heard. But then on the small business side, on the restaurant owner side, we can say, okay, we know we've got X number of months, therefore I'm going to purchase nicer umbrellas. I'm going to improve the look of the parklet. I'm going to plant a beautiful jasmine vine, which I think would also do a lot to soften the anger of a number of the locals. So all that to say, I really appreciate you taking this up this evening. I know it's been a difficult topic for a good long while now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Bashar?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate you as always. I mean, definitely what Anthony said when David said, I'm going through this in my 3 restaurants as well. And this is a daily struggle with people want to dine outside. Yesterday I had, outside is full and inside it was only 1 table. No one wants to be inside and catch restaurant. The truth is that we do really care about the locals. And I think our action speaks for that throughout the years. And I hope everybody understands that we don't really like having outdoor dining for us is not just a luxury, like how people think it's a luxury. We're struggling with maintaining that, having these outdoor heated and umbrellas and with the wind, with the winter, with the tables, with the distance between inside and outside. So we actually accept all these struggles because we want to continue to provide healthy environment and get through this period and the uncertainty that we don't feel safe in it. So that's why we're actually asking, and I hope you all continue understanding that it is an uncertainty for us, and it's really like we don't know what is tomorrow. Apparently, now the mandate of mask is coming back. So that means if we trust our supervisors of the county, that we put them in place to take decisions on our behalf. They think and they believe that we are in a healthy environment. That's why we are having masks back again. Now, a couple facts for me. It's like if someone about parking, we're over the busy time. We are getting into the slow time. 1,142 parking spots in Carmel, and we're taking only 30. That's less than 2.6%. I don't know, I'm having a hard time to understand how we have causing the parking in this 30 spots out of 1,142. Now, the most important thing is the language of the ruling was on May that we get back 90 days. We have 90 days in the parklets after no restrictions inside. Now we have restrictions came back to inside. So my understanding to that language, we need to reset the 90 days after removing restrictions. So automatically, based on what you voted on May, what we need right now that's it. The parklets outside keeps going until the restrictions removed, because this is a restriction of having masks, and who knows what's next. Thank you so much. I believe that you understand everything, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bashar. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
Sue McLeod.
Sue, the floor is yours.
Just a question first. Brandon, what is the outside date that is followed for that the county would be giving us? What's the longest out that this would be into November or December? I'm not quite clear.
So once you've finished your comments, we'll take those questions under submission.
Okay. Well, my answer depends a little bit on the answer. There are 2 things. One, we're heading into the Christmas shopping season. 2, we're heading into our hopefully wetter weather and not very nice to eat outside. So my thought was that we have to think about our storekeepers and the shopkeepers and the Christmas shopping season. That might be falling off from where it should be at this time of the year if there is a continued parking problem as there is now.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Ashley, what do you think?
Mayor Potter, this is Dale Byrne.
Dale, your floor is yours. Of course, don't be shy.
Okay, real quickly. So ultimately the solution, in addition to having parklets, if they exist, is to get the air inside the restaurant as clean as the air outside the restaurant. And long-term, that's something that needs to be done. So Carmel Cares, we're into beautification, safety, and making the city inviting. So in terms of safety and inviting, we're partnering with Bill Hayward Score, and a company called Air-by-Design. And last week we modeled the interior of 3 restaurants, pretty sophisticated, using LiDAR technology. And we installed sophisticated air sensors in those 3 restaurants, and it can be monitored online. We've got HEPA filters that are internet enabled in 2 of them. That company, Air-by-Design, is doing the analysis, and we've also looked at the HVAC systems, which are interesting in Carmel, as you'd expect. Anyway, the goal is to get all the restaurants in Carmel clean air certified, and the pilot projects will prove how we can do that. And we've got some grant money, and we're going to get more grant money. So the first 3 restaurants are going to be free, and hopefully we can do all of them for free or a very minor expense. Anyway, we're working on it, and I think it's a big international story if we can all work together and make this happen. The restaurants have been very happy to work with us, so we're going to keep plugging away at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Anybody else wishing to speak?
I'm not seeing anybody else.
All right, Ashley, that note, unless somebody wants to jump forward now, I'm going to close the public comment period, bring it back to staff. Brandon, do you have comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I can respond to Mayor McLeod's question. So the outside date, there is no date. What the county did with their ordinance is set up requirements for when the mask mandate would go away, and it's based on those CDC levels of substantial or high. So when those levels change to moderate or low, that's the trigger. And then there would be that 30-day grace period that I was talking about. So 30 days after that trigger changed. The only qualifier to that is they do have a provision in the ordinance that says, or upon termination by the Board of Supervisors, meaning the supervisors at any point in time could rescind their ordinance as well. So those are the sort of 2 triggers. And Mr. Mayor, what I can do, I can make sure that a link to this ordinance that's signed by the county is available. I can send it out through our constant contact to all the people that are interested in outdoor dining. We can make it available. It's not that difficult to find, but the county's website is much harder to navigate than ours. So I can try to help make that available for our folks in town.
Appreciate that, Brandon. Thank you. Sure. All right, bring it back to council for discussion. Council members, your thoughts? Karen, are you trying to move towards the mic? Yes, there you are. Thank you.
I was hoping that this would be the month that we could say goodbye to the parklets and goodbye to this situation. Unfortunately, with the mask mandate, I think that's not possible. I would like to tell you, though, that I've walked downtown on some of those cloudy, windy days, and people don't seem afraid to be inside. Many of the restaurants were absolutely full when the outside parklets were empty. So I think this idea that nobody wants to sit inside rings a little hollow. Of course, they might prefer to sit outside, but they don't seem to be afraid to sit inside when the weather is bad. I do think that, we are going to have to extend this. How long we're going to have to extend it, I don't know. What criteria we could name. We are going to be approaching when they were supposed to come out December 31st of last year. We're within a month and a half, 2 months of that. This has gone on far longer than I think anyone wanted. And I do think that a lot of the residents are really, really tired of it, tired of walking through the restaurants. I'm also very concerned that several of the restaurants are not ADA compliant. And ADA compliancy does not go away just because we put the parklets outside. So I really think if these are going to continue, they have to become ADA compliant, and they have to have the spacing that they're supposed to have, because if we are going to go into another surge, there has to be some minimal spacing to keep us safer. Until we get everybody vaccinated, we are going to be in this situation. I mentioned last month that I'd been in New York when the vaccine mandate hit. It was just fine. People show their card, they show their ID, and they go in and they feel better about being inside. I was in San Francisco a week ago, and obviously, David, I wasn't in quite maybe the same neighborhood you were, because I saw some horror stories. I saw some absolute shacks, broken down looking shacks in the street. And again, vaccine mandate, show your card, show your vaccine. You felt a lot better about being in that restaurant. I haven't really seen any of our restaurateurs think about asking for vaccine proof. I have seen some of our restaurants insist on masks, and I approve of that and I respect that. And I think some of them have taken a lot of complaints as a result, but I do respect them for doing that. As far as rebuilding, no, I would say no to the wine parklets out in the road. I think it's fine that we allow them to stay outside. And I do think that it is time to start the process if we are going to change our general plan, change our ordinances, get that started for at least the wine tasting. As far as rebuilding parklets for restaurants that voluntarily took theirs away, if we get into a very, very, very serious surge again, at that point, I would contemplate allowing them to rebuild those. I would reluctantly do that, but I would understand if we are in dire straits and there is no more dining inside, but only in that respect. So I'll listen to my other councilman about timing.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Other colleagues, anybody else wishing to speak? So I guess I'll pipe up again. So I do think that we said clearly that we didn't want the winery parklets back. So I don't know quite why we keep discussing that, Brandon, but I'm not being argumentative or anything. I just think we've kind of had that discussion. We made a decision. So if we could take that off the table, that'd be helpful. And I do think there's consensus to go ahead and move forward with the amendment to allow that the outside tasting occurs on site. I think there's support for that. I'm not going to make that a motion, but okay, well, never mind. Brett, Jeff's going. Jeff, you got a little something in your ear?
Yes, sir, I do. There's, yes, wine flies from stale wine. We had a strategic, for everyone's benefit, we had a public meeting. We've had several where we talked about strategic planning, and no one showed up again. We had over 65 priorities, changing the SIC designation for retail establishments that sell wine and on an ancillary basis have wine tasting wasn't on anyone's radar. That was what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So, I'll need consensus from three of you that this becomes a priority, council, before we begin any work on it. And as I said, during our strategic planning, that means something comes off the page as well, that we're not going to be able to prioritize just based on capacity constraints. So this was not on our radar. I know that Mr. Galante has been talking about it ad nauseum for 3 or 4 months, and that's fine, and Mrs. Galante. But again, the council has not provided definitive direction to move forward. So I hear what you're saying, Mayor, and I've heard what Councilmember Ferlito is saying as well, but I'll need at least one more of you, please, to provide that direction. And then I'll come back with you with a revised priority list to tell you, unfortunately, what we're not going to be able to get to.
I would like to clarify.
Go ahead, Karen.
I did not necessarily say that would get approved, but it could start the public process when and if we have the capacity to do that, because it's a lot more complicated than many of the people understand. Right now, wine tasting rooms are retail shops. They would have to have a complete change of designation. So it would have to go through a very complete process.
Exactly. And Chip, I share your frustrations about lack of attendance at the meetings we've been having. That's not the first retreat or council priority setting meeting where we've had, but it's frighteningly under-attended by the public. And yet I've heard rumblings out there that they feel that we need a town hall meeting to get our attention. We've been trying to get the public's attention to participate in this process on end. And I can use your for ad nauseum if you like, Chip, but I don't want to be redundant. But honestly, it is frustrating that we're being accused of lack of involvement We've had these meetings and nobody cares enough to show up. I know it's a commitment to take an entire day of your time to go to these meetings, but on the other hand, it's a very productive forum. It's very loosely run. I'm not my usual draconian self, limiting you to 3 minutes. You get multiple opportunities to testify. I think that's more than fair, and that's a disadvantage to a forum like that versus a forum where you have 3 minutes when we're opining on topics that need definitive decisions and directions. I would really encourage the public to not be so frustrated that they don't think we're listening. I think if you came and heard what we were saying, you'd understand what's going on better. On that happy note, anybody else wish to talk about the item tonight? Jeff?
Yeah, I'll go. I echo Karen's view with one exception. You know, this mask mandate, you know, I find it kind of ironic.
Anthony, thank you.
Kids, oh my God. I find it kind of ironic that a year ago we had businesses and especially restaurants complaining about the health officers mandate and using that against public policy, and now we have restaurants jumping on the bandwagon of this mandate, which is not a health policy mandate. This is a political mandate passed by the Board of Supervisors over the objection of the Monterey County Health Officer. So I'm not saying that this is necessarily bad policy, but I don't find, you know, I don't find the fact that we now have a mask mandate to be neither here nor there. This mask mandate, while I welcome it, is a political decision, not a health-based decision. I would also point out that just to reiterate that I agree with Karen. The restaurants are still full. There's no vaccination checking by the restaurants, which they could do to enforce the safety, you know, make their environments safer as well. So I'm still, you know, obviously I'm a little bit frustrated, not by Anthony's kids, mind you. I'm still frustrated that we're having this conversation every month, and I hope that one way or another we don't have to have this conversation in December. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Bobby?
Well, I'm sorry that you feel that, you know, this important discussion isn't heard every month, but it seems like it was probably a good call that it is being heard today, because if I would have voted with you last month, we wouldn't be hearing it. We would just be stuck with this mandate. So I think it is a worthwhile to have it every 30 days. I am not opposed to that. And as I said, at, you know, 3 hours and 55 minutes into the last meeting, and once again at 4 hours and 1 minute, my decision tonight would be based on what the county supervisors did on October 29th. So as promised, it does weigh heavy on me. And so therefore I would vote to extend this another 30 days. Now, if my colleagues don't want to look at it in another 30 days, then it just takes 3 of you to change that.
Carrie.
And I feel people's frustration. To Karen's point, we were hoping that we wouldn't have been with COVID this long. So I understand people's frustration with the way they look. And not all of them are up to Carmel architectural standards. I understand that. I also understand what the restaurants are dealing with, because I'm dealing with some of the customers that are demanding and frustrated by having to continue to deal with COVID. I get it on both sides. From a business standpoint, this has been probably the hardest issue to deal with on such a long period of time, because it's so hard to predict. One day we're not having masks, the next day we are. The spikes, the lows and the highs. It's just, as a business person, I am absolutely tired. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And because we are continuing to have to deal with this issue. And and the health and safety of people in our community is of utmost importance. And, you know, my sense is we do need to, with the new mask mandate for the county that we're all having to deal with, we do need to extend the parklets. And once again, they're temporary parklets. I know it seems like they're permanent, Karen, but they are temporary from my standpoint, because we have not decided on from a long-term perspective. In terms of the wine tasting rooms, I'm fine with them in private space, but not in public space. So that stays the same for me. And if a restaurant wants to, has removed them and we continue to have this bout with spikes, I'm okay with them returning. I will say that we do need to extend them. And so we'll see how long that extension goes for here. So.
Thank you, Carrie. So I guess for me, I feel like we're kind of on this car or something. We want to get to this destination. We're all driving somewhere. The destination is known, and yet our GPS system's broken on a regular basis. We just seem to hit these bumps and turns in the roads where we think we can get to that destination, which is a determination of finalization of the entire parklet issue. And yet we're constantly having to make wrong turns or right-hand turns when we don't really know where we're going at the whole time. It's very frustrating. I think we all share the same frustrations, whether you're a restaurateur, you're a member of the public, or whether you're a decision-making board like we are. Very, very frustrating. But I do think that the only way we're going to do this is if we do a 30-day extension, and then we take a look and see where we are at the end of the 30 days. I mean, what are we going to do? If the mandate's still there, then I don't know why we'd even meet again. So I'm kind of prone to saying, let's go ahead and do the 30 days. But if the mandate's in place, then let's go ahead and let Chip do his authority and go ahead and go with that. I mean, I'm not going to say that's a definitive motion, but it's my thought at the moment. It's why do we have to keep coming back when we're getting absolutely nothing but more angst and anger and upset individuals? I do think Karen brings up a good point. I think the ADA compliance issue is very important. I think we should make sure that that's being enforced. If it's not enforced, we've got more tools out there for enforcement. So to Chip, I would say, do you think that's possible? Or Brandon?
We're looking at whether Councilmember Ferlito said that the pandemic and the governor's or our emergency orders did not void ADA requirements. We do have ADA law and interpretation, and Mr. Pierrick's looking at it. So I can guarantee you, Mr. Mayor, if we're obligated, where the restaurateurs are obligated to continue to provide ADA access, that will enforce that, just like we do with their insurance and their payment for their outdoor seating spaces in the right of way and other things, Mr. Mayor. And my suggestion is that if you are keen on forging a motion, as you just kind of said, you could make that, you could condition it that way, a 30-day outdoor seating extension. And if we're still under the county mask mandate, then it would be automatically kind of like an option year, right? Or option month, that they'd be extended for an additional 30 days. I will say as well that Councilmember Tice and I have been discussing this at our individual updates. If you're keen on that option, the 30-day plus the 30-day, please wrap it to the 15th of January or something, so we can get the restaurateurs through the Christmas and then the New Year's season outdoors, and then you have a hard stop to come back to you at your January, in a January meeting sometime, middle of January.
But my thought was, if the mandate is lifted during that period of time, that we go to that hard stop at that point.
I see. Yes, sir.
What do you guys think?
I would support that, Mayor. That would be, well, we're just going, we've kind of forged the same path as we did last month, and I would be in support of that. And to not have it, if we had the option to, if the mandate was still in place, then we don't have to hear it. I don't know if that's possible, how you would agendize that, or if that's possible. Chip, maybe?
I think it is, and again, I think that we can craft some language with you that would condition it thus.
All right, Karen, did you have some discussion?
Well, yes, I really am serious about the ADA compliance, and it's not just a ramp. It's also table height. It's a certain percentage of the seats have to be ADA compliant. So I really do want to hear what you find out about that. Secondly, I am concerned with wind and rain and so on, that some of the parklet accoutrements may not be safe. Wind can blow over umbrellas. Wind can blow over some of those heaters. Some of the more flimsy parklets could blow over by themselves. I mean, I remember when Pepe's blew over in the street. So I would really like to see them inspected to make sure that they are weather worthy, because the last thing we want is someone to be hurt by some of the things that are in those parklets that are subject to wind. And the day that I walked downtown, I saw several umbrellas laying down on the ground. Maybe they were placed there on purpose. I'm not sure, but I think we need to make a little bit storm worthy here.
All right. Brian, you come up suddenly. Do you have something you want to say, or just about showing us your new background?
Well, a little of both. So I would say that based on what I'm hearing, whoever fashions this motion, we may not know whether the mask mandate is in effect at the time of your next meeting until a certain point in time. And I think you've got to draw that line. My suggestion would be that in your motion, you say, if the mask mandate is still in effect as of the date of the posting of the agenda, then the matter will be extended to your meeting in, I guess, January. However, if the mask mandate is not in place when the agenda is posted, then the item will be put on the agenda for further discussion at your December meeting.
I'd so move.
I'd second.
Yeah, under discussion. I'm trying to get this thing moving.
I have a friendly amendment.
I mean,
Okay,
I have a question. I have a question for Brandon, and I think he probably knows what it is. Since the mask mandate is going into effect next week, isn't it sort of automatic that the mask mandate is going to be in effect when the next agenda gets posted?
Thank you, Councilmember Barron. That was sort of the interjection I wanted to make maybe to Brian's motion, because there's a nuance to when the mask mandate goes away. So I would suggest perhaps the language would be better served that when the CDC levels drop below substantial or high, that's the trigger for when the mask mandate 30-day clock starts. So you may want to make it that you won't agendize it until such a time that the levels in the county drop below substantial or high, because Councilmember Barron's correct. There's a 30-day window already built into this the minute that it goes back to the lower levels.
Okay, since I have the floor, let me ask another question. Since it sounds like we're going to, since it sounds like the mask mandate is not in effect in December, could we just go to January and then have this discussion in January and just forget about all this stuff? You know, my main interest in I think the discussion is doing harm to not only the council, but to the community. Mm-hmm. And I would be interested, you know, in just taking a month off from the discussion, regardless of what the mask mandate is. So that's my frustrations coming through, obviously, and I apologize for that. But that's where, you know, let's just forget about yeah.
So,
Carrie.
So I would do a substitute motion to extend the parklets, restaurant parklets, until our January meeting, and take December off. I agree with Jeff. It's polarizing, and in terms of it's a slower time of year when it comes to business. Even though it's the holiday season, unfortunately, our busiest time of our retail season is during the summer and during Concourse Week. Unfortunately, because of internet shopping and malls, people do not flock to, I wish they would, and we've tried to engage the retailers every year during Christmas to get people to come here, but actually having the parklets open may get people here. So that's my substitute motion, Mayor.
All right, I'd support that, but I'd support it more for the health reasons than the retail reasons, but that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Health is absolutely, as I've stated before, my concern as well.
Council, I'm going to turn to Ashley to determine whether we're going to have our council meeting on Tuesday, January 4th, which would mean we'd be in a production cycle the week between Christmas and New Year's, or whether it will be Tuesday, January 11th. Again, you'll review your 2022 calendar at the December meeting. But Ashley, what are you thinking regarding when we're going to meet in January?
Especially given the fact that week between Christmas and New Year's is dead time.
Yeah, and honestly, Chip, I think that's our decision in terms of the agenda, what the date is. So I'm not sure that that's really staff's decision. So how about if I suggest to Carrie that she just choose a date that's maybe January 20th and not January 15th. So we just don't have to worry about the timing of the agenda.
Yeah, and I understand the point. If we have a later meeting, that would only allow 4 days for the restaurants. So I'm looking at a calendar.
Alternately, you could just say in the motion the next regular meeting, and it would default to the next regular meeting. Unless you do, I guess, if you want to it at the middle of the month, then you could determine it at the December meeting what that next regular meeting will be, whether it's the 4th or the 11th.
Okay. Kieran, are you trying to say something?
Yes, there is the caveat that the Board of Supervisors could cancel this should the numbers go down substantially. So that is one of the considerations. And what would we do then? The other thing is, I believe that our emergency ordinance that allowed all this to happen was supposed to be brought back to us for review every 60 days. And it's been far more than 60 days for us to review the emergency ordinance. So I would ask that we also review that at the same time.
Ryan, you're surfaced again.
The answer to the comment that I just heard is that the last I heard, and I can look it up again, but that the governor suspended the 60-day requirement with his various orders in 2020. I'll double check that, but that's my understanding.
Well, I think that's the understanding of the community, that it was to be renewed or reviewed to see the necessity of it. But yes, I'll defer to you checking on that.
I'm not sure what the community understands, but I'm just relying on what the order is that the governor issued, and I will check that, Councilmember Ferlito, and send an email to the council, let y'all know.
Okay, because I think it's in our resolution that it would be brought forward.
It does say that, and the reason was because at the time there was a 60-day requirement, but that was very early on. That was in March of last year, and the governor's order, I think, came out shortly after that, suspending this 60-day requirement.
Okay, and the reason I brought that up is because the ordinance says under great peril and great danger. It speaks, in very scary language of the reason that ordinance exists, that resolution exists. And I question, if we are still under great peril and great danger, why are we continuing to advertise the way we do? Because we are inviting people to our community. And if we are still in peril and in danger, maybe that's a dichotomy we should discuss.
All righty, in the interest of moving this item forward, do we have a motion out there? Carrie, you had one on the floor, I think, but it sounds like you might want to modify it or amend it slightly based on staff input.
So I have a substitute motion to extend the outdoor restaurant temporary parklets through January 20th, and for it to come back for council discussion at our next regular meeting in January.
And I'll withdraw my motion so we don't have to vote that at all. So, all right. So we have a new motion. Bobby?
For discussion.
Hold on. Let me just see. We get a second to that. We'll have discussion under.
Yeah, since I suggested this to Carrie just a few minutes ago, I'll second it, and I will support this motion simply so we don't have to talk about this in December.
Okay. All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Now under discussion, Bobby.
Okay. Is that the right date when, if we're charging rent for these people, will, staff will just have to prorate that? Are you guys aware of that? You aware of that, Carrie and Jeff? You're fine with that?
Yep. Chip, you gave a thumbs up.
Yeah, if that's the date, we'll just prorate it by the day. We'll also look at the ADA compliance issues and then the weather worthiness as well. That was referenced by a council member.
Thank you.
All right, now staff, do we have direction on the motion? Are we clear on the motion?
We are clear on the motion.
All right, good. All right, so let's call the question then. Ashley, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
Yes.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
Mayor Potter.
Aye.
It is unanimous.
Thank you very much. Boy, interesting times, let me tell you guys. All right, why don't we move on to the last item of the night, which is item number 6. I'm going to try to abbreviate this to make sure the public's aware of what we're dealing with. Consideration of appeal of the Historic Resources Board resolution issuing a determination of consistency with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties for design review for the installation of a bronze plaque containing names of both military and non-military individuals on a Carmel stone base on the west side of the World War I Memorial Arch Monument located in the public right-of-way within the medium of Ocean Avenue on the east side of San Carlos Street. All righty, that's the item. Staff, are you prepared to be, I believe, Marnie, are you handling this?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, Mr. Mayor, Marnie is going to be giving a presentation. While she's pulling that up, I just wanted to give a quick framing of this item. So as you rightly pointed out, this is an appeal of a decision by the Historic Resources Board. The hearing is de novo, but it is important to remember that the City Council is being asked to make a determination on the consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards of the proposal. So if the City Council were to effectively find it consistent, this item would still have to go to the Planning Commission for a design review approval. I just want to put that out there so that put the City Council in the frame of the matter. This is relative to consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for language on the plaque and whether or not a plaque is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Waffle for the presentation.
Thanks for that clarification, Brandon. Hello, Marnie.
Marnie, are you able to get your presentation up there?
Okay, well, I was looking for my unmute button, so I just found that.
And I think you're sharing the wrong screen.
It's always relieving for me when that happens to somebody who's more technologically knowledgeable than I am.
There you go. And there you go. And then go to display settings.
Just
up at the top.
Yes.
Click on that. Flip. There you go.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, good evening, City Council. I'm Marnie Waffle with the Community Planning and Building Department. So before you this evening is the World War I memorial plaque. So as many of you know, the memorial was designed and constructed in 1922 by architect Charles Sumner Green. The memorial is a local historic resource, and as such, any modification must be carried out in accordance with historic preservation standards. So in 2020, the Friends of the Memorial Arch completed a restoration project, repairing and replacing damaged stones. And then earlier this year, the Planning Commission approved the installation of bollards as well as a post and chain barrier to protect the restored memorial. The current project consists of the installation of an informational bronze plaque. The plaque would be set in soil on the west side of the monument. The proposed plaque educates readers on the purpose and the history of the memorial and lists the names of both military veterans and auxiliary service members who supported the war effort. Similar plaques can be found honoring those who served in World War II as well as Vietnam in Devendorf Park. The design, fabrication, and installation of this plaque would be completed by the Friends of the Memorial Arch. The photos represent a mock-up of what the plaque would look like in the planter area. The plaque language that was approved by the Historic Resources Board is shown on the far right and includes the names of those who served in the Army and Navy, as well as those who were part of the auxiliary services. Modifications to historic resources do require review by the Historic Resources Board prior to approval of a design review permit. On August 16th, the board reviewed the project and directed the applicants to further evaluate the list of names on the plaque, as well as reducing the overall size while maintaining readability. At a special meeting on September 10th, the board reviewed the modifications to the plaque and voted 4-1 approving a determination of consistency for the placement of a new plaque inclusive of all the names, both military and auxiliary, as well as some minor modifications to the text. The municipal code states that decisions of the Historic Resources Board can be appealed to the City Council. And on October 13th, an appeal was filed by former mayors Sue McLeod and Ken White, as well as Master Stonemason Brian McEldowney and Mike Brown. The appeal contends that the list of names should be limited to those who served in the military and returned as veterans, with the auxiliary services recognized on a plaque to hang at City Hall, as was originally intended by architect Charles Sumner Green. Staff has prepared a draft resolution that the council may adopt this evening, upholding the Historic Resources Board issuance of the determination of consistency with the inclusive list of names. Alternatively, the council could grant the appeal and issue a determination of consistency with a list of names limited to military veterans only. A third option would be to continue the appeal and direct staff to engage a qualified professional to evaluate the consistency of an additional plaque at the monument. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of Marnie at this time by council members? I don't see any. All righty, I'll open it up to public then for public comment. There's an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on this item. Please recognize there's a 3-minute limitation on your testimony.
Yes, I would like to speak.
Sue, you have the floor.
And let me read it so I can be sure to get in the 3-minute limit.
That'd be great.
I speak for myself and the former mayors Townsend, White, and Dallas, Vice Mayor Hastovac, and council members Talmadge, Ely, and Rose. We all articulate our strong support as recognized by the state of, quote, the state of California that Carmel's World War I Memorial Arch is significant under California Register Criteria 1 as a community's expression of pride in and respect for the 56 Carmelites who served their country in the First World War. It is also significant under California Register Criteria 3 as the work of one of California's most notable architects, Charles Sumner Green. This stone arch is the only major public monument in Carmel. It was designed as a tribute to the men in the village who served in World War I. It is a landmark worthy of listing in the California Registry of Historic Places. The photograph of the arch in your packet, you will note the bell at the top, and it is inscribed, "In honor of those who served, in memory of those who died." We dedicate this bell, and it was done by the American Legion. Similarly, there's a small brass plaque at the base of that open portion that states, "This memorial is dedicated to the men of Carmel who responded to their country's call during World War I. We salute them," again from the American Legion. To then add a large, I guess it's going to be on the north side of the arch, which includes men and women and people who worked at home, is not in the concept of what the the monument was for. And lastly, as noted above, is its significance under California Registry Creation Criteria 1. While there may, it's hard to see here, may have been consideration of including the non-combatant names on the memorial, those directly involved at the time did not support that, but made a special display designed by Charles Sumner Green with the names of the non-combatants and hung it in pride of place in City Hall, from where it hung until it disappeared in 1943. Thus, it would seem the most appropriate and consistent with history is to reconstruct the green designed board with the names of the non-combatants, hang it in City Hall as was done before, and a photo of the actual original one exists in the Huntington Library, the Charles Sumner Green archives in the Huntington Library.
Thank you, Sue. Well done. All right, it's like Ian Martin might want to talk, and then Richard Kreitman. Ian.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Potter and members of council. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I cannot share my screen. I'm not allowed to share my screen. I've got a quick slideshow deck.
Can we pause this for a second? Can Ian share his screen or not?
Go ahead and share your screen, Ian, and I'll keep an eye on the timer.
All right, thank you, Ashley. So here is, all right, hang on one second here. Okay, can you see this?
No.
All right, one moment, hang on. All right, now can you see that?
Yep.
Good. So anyway, here is the World War I memorial design drawing of Charles Sumner Green. And note at the base there, it says, "To those who served." And this is a catchphrase used during the Carmel community during the Great War and immediately thereafter as how it would define those who served, right? And so here is the rendering Charles Sumner Green prepared. It ran in the pine cone the day before the cornerstone of the memorial was laid in November 1921. And again, it has "To those who served." So how are they defining those who served? Well, all you have to do is look at the front page of the Carmel pine cone, and there's the list, those who served, right? And that is on the front page of the Carmel pine cone, and you have Army and Navy, and you have auxiliary service, right? And under auxiliary service, you have people who served in the Red Cross, the YMCA, James Hopper, who was a war correspondent, and it's very clear that the Carmel community wanted to honor not only the people who served in the Army and Navy, but also those who served in these auxiliary services as well. The Carmel community of yesteryear took a very inclusive approach to who it wanted to commemorate. And the City Hall plaque not only has the auxiliary services that Mayor McLeod mentioned, it also has all of these military names as well, in keeping with how the community took this very inclusive approach. And so the appellants have only provided, all their research, almost all of it is secondary source material. Most of it has no citations, no references. The Sharon Hale book, which has been the cornerstone of their argument, doesn't even have a bibliography. Our side, on the other hand, is relying on entirely primary source material from the time of World War I, immediately after it as well. And it's all largely through the Carmel pine cones to make it very clear that this is what the Carmel community wanted to do. They wanted to have this inclusive approach. Now, that was not my choice. It was not Kreitman's choice, but it was clearly the choice of the Carmel community of the World War I era. And all we are trying to do is honor the wishes of the Carmel community of yesteryear and who they wanted to commemorate and have remembered for their service in the Great War as defined by them, all right, not by us. So in closing, the appellants have not offered anything like the evidence that would be required to overturn a 4-to-1 approval of the HRB. So please deny this appeal. If anybody has any questions, I would certainly try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. All right, Richard, you have the floor.
Okay, I also would like to share my screen, please. Okay, Ian is still sharing, so I cannot share.
Sorry, how do I release my screen? I am a Zoom newbie.
At the bottom, Ian, you should see a thing that says stop screen share. It's a little red
All right,
button.
up, stop share, boom. Thank you.
And now I'd like to share. Are you getting me?
Good, we don't have anything else, so.
Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. As Ian said, so this was the original front page of Charles Sumner Green's drawing for the arch that he donated to the city, as well as his services in supervising the construction, to those who served in the late war. And just to provide, again, this is what Ian was speaking to, the front page of the Pine Cone on November 10th, 1921. So next Wednesday, 100 years. But in 1943, and he was referring to that, to the lost plaque in City Hall that hung in the City Hall chambers. And this is an article from the 1943 Pine Cone that says, City Hall Honor Roll reminds that 58 served in World War I, all returned home in Carmel. The author obviously couldn't count because this plaque, which hung in City Hall at that time, contained 61 names. But this is the listing on that plaque. It is the 61 names, and Ian found this in the archives. This is the plaque that hung in City Hall. And in this plaque, all of the names, or the first 50 names or so, are in alphabetical order, with the Army, Navy, and auxiliary service people all just included together. They don't even make the distinction like they did on the front page of the Pine Cone. And then down at in the lower right, they added some names. This is the roll of honor of the Carmel community for World War I. It says Carmelo Precinct, that was the draft area, draft precinct, a selective service. So the evidence of the actual historical primary sources is that the city, the community, the veterans in that community wanted to include all of these names when honoring those who served in World War II. And there was another, one of the things in the appeal, they spoke of these other names as homebodies, which is essentially an insult to these people. At least half of them served, at least half of them deployed to Europe. Perry Newberry, famous Carmelite, served with the 304th Field Artillery. He was gassed by the Germans. You should read, I know that the materials that went with the packet were very long, but in there is the review of that regiment, and read what Perry Newberry experienced and what he did. It's very touching. Under combat, in the Argonne Forest. The Kellogg's, who served with the Committee for the Relief of Belgium, saved the lives of millions of Belgian and French civilians with their work to prevent starvation. Their story is one of the proudest stories of Carmel, and it is written up in many of some of those small historical books that speaks of the Kellogg's. And so we should be very proud of these people. We should be proud of the community 100 years ago who wished to honor all who served. Now, if people in the 21st century want to apply their opinions, their prejudices, their suppositions to this, the listing on this plaque, they're perfectly willing to do so, but they can't rewrite history. This is what the community 100 years ago chose. So, and as it is, we're not going to have so if I have a little time left, please
no,
come
I think you're done.
Thursday. Okay. Well, I'm just inviting people to the ceremony at the arch. We won't have a plaque, which is not important. What's important is rededicating a wonderful monument.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation earlier. Looks like we have another member of the Kreitman family speaking. Am I right?
Yes, there is another Kreitman.
Very good. Floor is yours.
Dad, do you want to stop screen sharing?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Screen sharing.
You can do this.
Yeah. Okay.
We discuss precedent quite often in these situations. So setting aside this discussion of evidence or originalist or historical versus living or revisionist interpretation aside, what has concerned me most in the discussions over the past few months is a tacit value judgment placed through a division of service. Respectfully, in my heart, it rings mean-spirited and against the character, I believe, of the community I was raised in. That is to say, by suggesting only the names of official U.S. service members be listed on the plaque, and to remove that of non-veterans places a value on the service of Carmel's forebearers. It differentiates one sacrifice from another. Regardless of deployment, position, or status, sacrifice is sacrifice. Each individual, regardless of the office or seat, organization, or badge they served under or for, that they gave their time, their energy, and as my dad said, many gave their lives on the battlefield to support their country. Each answered the call of their country and of their community. Over the past few months' meetings and in letters published, I've heard some others spin circles to say otherwise. But simply to say one name is not to be placed with another or to be placed somewhere else is to say the sacrifice of one person is not to be placed equal to another. Sacrifice is sacrifice. Service is service. I worry about the precedent that this sets for the character of our community. Do we, as a community, as Carmel-by-the-Sea, choose to reflect inclusivity or division? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Linda, I believe.
This is Linda L. Smith. Hi, Dave. Hi, Mayor Potter and members of the council. I just want to say, it's said, and I believe it to be true, that the most terrible kind of death is when we're forgotten. As a daughter of old Carmel and of a World War I veteran, I feel that the very spirit of old Carmel, the Carmel that gave birth out of community solidarity to this memorial, is in danger of that kind of death should this appeal be approved. In truth, the World War I arch does not belong to us. It belongs to the community of Carmel who went through that great war, the war to end war, together. Their intention for it is what's important. And if one studies history, this intention is well documented. Charles Sumner Green envisioned and designed the arch with this Carmel spirit in mind. The framed list of those who served that he had written in pencil on cardboard was obviously a mock-up for a plaque. All the names on it were in alphabetical order, servicemen and auxiliary mixed together. I grew up with stories of the old Carmel my father had known so well. He was a boy who came here in 1905 and a flyer in the new Army Air Corps during World War I. He talked constantly about the spirit of all for one and one for all that was the hallmark of that community. And what a community it was. The first list of those who served, published on the day before the Armistice Day celebration, November 11th, 1921, is a Carmel history lesson. Those were the people intended to be honored by the construction of the Memorial Arch. My father and his brother, also a flyer, and no doubt most other of the armed service veterans of that war from Carmel, if they could speak, would say, no, this is wrong. We want these men and women to be honored along with us. Their service in the auxiliary services has been as important as ours. We're one with them. I know the appellants are well-intentioned, but I think they're misinformed, and the course of action that they advise would betray the very spirit in which World War I Memorial Arch was conceived. Wouldn't it be appropriate to finally properly fulfill the vision of that Carmel community of 1921, a simple plaque listing all those who served, together with the monument built to honor them. With the greatest respect for the hard work that's been done to restore the arch and those who did it, I have to support the denial of this appeal, and I would hope the issue could be redirected back to the Historic Resources Board in order for the present day Carmel to fully explore the history as it pertains to any plaque in honor of those who served, and perhaps even redesign, simplify the plaque, but just refer it back for further exploration. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Linda. Brian?
I'm guessing it's me, Brian, since there's more than one of us.
Andrews, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So I emailed a letter to the city clerk. I don't know if you guys got it, so I can read that if you didn't. I support the appeal, and I'll go ahead and read this. We'll get through this quick. At first brush, the idea seems innocuous enough and inclusive of citizens that helped as they could during World War I. However, it also has the effect of rewriting history and making claims of the intent of persons that are unable to provide clarification where doubt is being sown. Beyond that, it also minimizes the degree of dedication and commitment from our uniformed veterans. On the point of attempting to be true to the intent of our predecessors who originally planned and executed the World War I Memorial Arch, we can and should look at how they made it and keep it as such. The very intentionally provided local recognition of non-veterans with a plaque at City Hall. It is difficult to understand how one can decide what was desired 100 years ago was not what they created. That leap of logic is impossible without supposition and conjecture. Any attempts to change what was actually done is indeed an attempt to rewrite the historical efforts of the original authors. They were the ones that actually lived and experienced that which they were memorializing. We do not suppose the original intent was to have the Statue of Liberty smiling, showing her teeth, and change her to do so. We keep our monuments intact and protect them from changes, natural or otherwise. Regarding the wording of the proposal and the proclamation, the term "those who served" means the men and women that have taken an oath and put on a military uniform for our country. When someone asks, "Did you serve?" or "Where did you serve?" there is no question of the intended meaning. If someone hears that, they do not interpret it as a question of anything other than military service. That is what it meant 100 years ago and still means that today. To attempt to change that is to sow seeds of doubt and change the interpretation of all writings from the various wars and conflicts that have plagued mankind. We cannot learn from history if we warp it to a degree where we're unable to see it start to repeat itself. Attempting to expand the accepted interpretation of the phrase also minimizes the men and women that have made the commitment to give up everything up to and possibly including their own lives to protect this country and its citizens. Unless someone has made that oath, they are not making the same promise. There's a definite difference in what has been agreed to. Finally, with regard to the plaque and the non-veteran names, I do agree there should be recognition. That was the original intent, and it was a separate recognition from the World War I memorial itself and should remain as such. It was originally in City Hall. However, I feel it could be appropriate to have it in Devendorf Park if so desired. That's what I've got. They originally had the list written alphabetical order. Somewhere along the way that changed. They got separated out, and the final ones had the whole list in City Hall.
Thank you, Brian.
That's what they wanted. That's what they got.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Gary? I think Gary's next, aren't you? Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Potter, council members. I'm Jerry Piratore, retired Army officer, currently the post commander for Post 512. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I need to tell you tonight that at last night's meeting, the American Legion voted to withdraw its support for the proposed plaque and placement. I'm a man divided though tonight, because as a citizen and as a veteran, I fully support the inclusive list. It's clear to me that 100 years ago, the people of Carmel intended to honor everybody that served in World War I. The revision is happening today by excluding those folks. I encourage you to support the plaque. Possibly it needs to be reworded. It's a little wonky in places, but to deny that plaque is to deny justice to folks who are long gone and can't speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated. So Ken White might be next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the time to appear. I speak for the Carmel Residents Association and as one of the appellants to the question of our World War I memorial. Both groups are unanimous in their recommendation to leave the memorial arch alone. If you choose to have the larger plaque or the one in question, I think we would support clearly replicating the plaque and moving it into the Devendorf Park with the other memorials. I ask you to see the simplistic beauty of the Charles Sumner Green design. It stands out as a complete and balanced work of art. This 100-year-old work of art stands at our village's busiest intersection and is not meant to be a gathering place. We would be no more able to add facial makeup to the Mona Lisa than add more adornment to the artful simplicity of our World War I memorial. Leave the arch alone, do the plaque, and put it with the rest of the plaques in Devendorf Park. We know what our history is, and it's very well published. We have poems, we have movies, we have books, we have plays, and songs written about Carmel-by-the-Sea and our history. We know what our history is. Leave the memorial arch as it was designed and meant to be, to honor those who rose to the colors and served. And thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight? Ashley, what do you think?
I'm not seeing any hands raised or anybody trying to unmute Mr. Mayor. I think we can close public comment. Wait, hold on.
Mike Brown.
Mike Brown. And Cindy Lloyd has raised her hand as well. Mike, are you there?
Mike, the floor is yours. Cindy Lloyd has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, Cindy, you might want to go ahead while Mike fixes his audio.
Okay. Mayor Potter, council members, and city staff. My name is Cindy Lloyd. I appear before you as one who has loved our memorial arch my whole life. Its steadfast dignity in face of changes swirling around it reminds me that standing tall and speaking the truth is the Carmel way. Mike Brown and Brian McEldowney have been staunch advocates for the protection and restoration of the arch using authentic materials treated as Charles Sumner Green designated. Michael LePage has been involved with plans for the arch's restoration. The American Legion members have been loyal and committed advocates for the protection of the arch. Ian Martin is the factual historian on Charles Sumner Green and his design for the memorial arch. Linda Smith reminds us of Carmel's soul and its cohesive citizenry who embraced all who gave so much to ensure that world peace during war. Richard Kreitman spearheaded the casting of a bell in Charles Sumner Green's design and now hangs in the arch. Anticipating the arch's 100th anniversary, he proposed a design for a plaque and placement within the arch's horse trough. His motivation was well-meaning. In 1921, the citizens of Carmel embraced all those who served by honoring them in a proclamation when the cornerstone for the arch was installed. Both veterans and civilians served at home and abroad in a variety of capacities. Fortunately, they all returned to Carmel, Carmel Valley, and Big Sur. Today, 100 years later, our community is divided. At this time of remembrance, for those whose lives were disrupted by war, then united in peace. My hope is that our common belief that no plaque should be placed on the memorial arch will bring us together again. We all respect, revere, and care deeply that our arch remains as Charles Sumner Green designed it. Further discussion regarding the plaque, what it should say, and where to put it can be done in future when in-person meetings resume. Reliance on emails and text messages has led to misunderstandings. That is unfortunate and unintended. It is my hope that our community can come together today with compassion and grace to honor the wishes of a century ago. Thank you.
Cindy, thank you. Okay, Mike Brown, do you want to give it a go again?
Yes, sir.
Hasn't gotten any better, Mike. Hasn't gotten any better. Do you have your phone on at the same time?
Mike, if you want to comment, give me a call and I'll put you on the speakerphone here. We'll let the next speaker talk, but it's 624-1366.
Okay, is there somebody else intending to speak tonight?
It looks like Brian McEldomey is trying, but he's also having problems unmuting. Well, he's unmuted, but we can't hear him.
Interesting phenomenon. Well, Mike, we're going to give you another minute or so since you are a member of the community that has a passion, but on the other hand, I don't want to keep everybody here all night.
Yeah, and even though, please try and make accommodations so Mike and Brian can both speak. I know it might take a little bit longer, but they definitely need to be heard tonight.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. Thank you. Try my best.
Yeah, call my office, 624-1366.
Thanks, Ashley.
While we're waiting,
no.
I just wanted to thank.
Sorry, Richard, no. Unless it's on a topic that has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now, no.
All right.
Thank you.
Brian? Hi, great, okay. I'm gonna start the clock and put you on speakerphone.
There you go.
All right, we have Brian here and we are starting his comments.
Right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Brian McEldowney. You know, it dawned on me that my family's been involved with this monument for 100 years. And when we worked on it in 1977, and Bill Askew hauled all the fallen down materials and the new materials to our yard in Sand City, we found a time capsule. And in that time capsule, there was 2 articles from the Carmel Pine Cone at the original dedication. And it had a list of the World War I veterans. And it very clearly said, this monument is to memorialize the World War I veterans. When it was rededicated in 1977, there was 2 copies of the Carmel Pine Cone dated November 10th, 1977, and there was 2 more Carmel Pine Cones put in that new time capsule. And I read 2 copies of the Pine Cone, a list of the war veterans, and a city proclamation had been stuffed into an empty ginger tin. I thought it was a Folgers coffee can. But anyway, copies of this week's Pine Cone will be sealed in a second capsule and then cemented into the monument according to, this is Jack Collins, the city administrator. And so it really is my, I'm embarrassed that it's come to this. It's a battle. This has been a project of love for me. I really enjoyed doing it. My family's been involved with it, and it's a shame it's come to this. But there's never ever been any kind of plaque on that monument other than the 2 dedication plaques. And this is no time to reinvent history and put a plaque there. It's just a misservice of, it's agendized misservice of history. It stands the way it is as a beautiful piece of masonry that is dedicated to our fighting men of World War I, and that's the way it should stay. If as a compromise, when I rebuilt it this last time, I took the time capsule stone out and I replastered it, the inside cubicle, and I waterproofed it, and there's plenty of room to put a new plaque, not a plaque, but a time capsule, and you could include the other 10 people that were involved with the war effort. But as far as
Brian, thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your incredible masonry work over the years.
So anyway,
thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your efforts too. Much appreciated.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Mike Brown, are you around?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, very clearly, fortunately.
Oh, good. Okay, somehow it worked. Anyway, I got to calm down now. The thing we got to remember, I think, is that Charles Sumner Green, when he designed this beautiful statue, memorial, there was no plaque put on it, no big plaque. He didn't. He wanted the beauty of that plaque to the beauty of that memorial to stand out on its own. And so then the decision was simply to put something down at City Hall. Let's remember, City Hall in those days was on Dolores and Ocean, not where it is today. When I look at Ken Seavey's evaluation, he says right here, it was designed by noted American architect Charles Sumner Green and restored by his son Gordon as a tribute to the men in the village who served in World War I. Look at this plaque that they want to put up. First of all, it's way too big. It's huge. It gets involved with rebuilding in 1977. It leaves out veterans. Veterans aren't mentioned any place here, which is most unfortunate, I think. And then it also, in a way, contradicts itself when it says, for those who died in that service. And then when you get down here further, it refers to all came home alive. The plaque is way too massive, does not belong on that memorial. Please, let's appreciate and respect the efforts of Mr. Charles Sumner Green. Okay, I'll try to keep this short. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your efforts. Okay, is there anybody else wishing to speak tonight?
I'm sorry, what?
No, thanks, Mike. I was just saying, is there anybody else who wishes to speak tonight?
I don't see anyone else, Mr. Mayor. I think we can close public comment.
Thank you, Ashley. All right, I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council for a discussion. Staff, Marnie, was there anything you wanted to comment about, anything you'd heard there? I'm going to take that as a no.
I have nothing to add, but thank you.
Okay. So we have one veteran on this council who I'd like to go to first. That'd be Bobby Richards. He did serve this country in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. Bobby, thank you for your service. Is there anybody?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think I'm well versed in both. I served in the Coast Guard from 1981 to 1987, and then again on Coast Guard Station 60 or Flotilla 64 auxiliarist since the year 2000, and I'm still an active auxiliarist. So I think I know both sides of that coin. And while I do differentiate between the two, I think they're both valuable. And what I would like to split up tonight is the idea of a plaque and the idea of the placement of the plaque. I would support this appeal, and which I don't like to normally support appeals from our junior commissions unless there's a reason. And I think that today there was a pretty valuable reason that came out of it. And that was when the commission voted on this, they had the support of Post 512. full disclosure, I'm also a member of the Post 512. Then tonight they have rescinded that and they do not support the placing of that plaque. So for that reason right there is why that would give me reason to not support or to support the appeal. However, I think the plaque is important, maybe not worded exactly how it's worded, but I do think it is important to recognize the servicemen and the auxiliarists that did help out during that war. And I would like to see that put in Davidoff Park or with the memorials. I think the arch should be left alone and it should be viewed from afar. I don't think it's a great idea to have people climb right up to it and try to read the names and try to understand it. We don't need to explain it like that close. They can view it, and if they want to find out more about it, they can go into the park and read the plaque and read why the plaque is there. So that would be my suggestion for this, is to support the appeal, put it back to HRB, and decide where we could put a plaque in Devendorf Park, leaving the arch alone.
So in the interest of time, why don't we even frame our discussion or objections around a motion? We consider that a motion. Is there a second to that? I'll second it. I'll second it for discussion purposes only. Carrie.
Thank you to everybody for speaking tonight. I have to appreciate the restoring of the memorial, and I have to appreciate that the committee or the Friends of the Memorial Arch, what they did. I'm a little disappointed that the Friends of the Arch did not come together to bring forward a way to memorialize and acknowledge the veterans. I'm a little surprised by that. And I think what we have is we have two issues, like Bobby said. We really need to keep the historicity of the arch what it is. And then we have the issue of we need to honor our World War I veterans and the people. And I do like the idea of having that serve in Devendorf Park. We really can't decide that tonight, but we can offer direction. So I'm fully supportive of no plaque on the memorial, and providing direction to staff and to maybe create something in Devendorf Park, which would really go there, that people could, that's a quiet place that you can contemplate what these veterans and these people did for our country. In the middle of Ocean Avenue, it's a little hard to do that. It really is. And even when I went and saw the arch, I mean, people were wondering if I was going to cross the street. So I think we really need to memorialize and honor these people. It's too bad that the plaque has disappeared from City Hall. So here's an opportunity that the community can come together and create something in Devendorf Park, but not on the arch.
Excellent. Thank you, Carrie. Karen?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who was involved in the restoration. It's a beautiful restoration. Secondly, I'd like to thank Ian Martin for the incredible research that he has done for this, as well as Linda Smith, Cindy Lloyd, the research they've done, and our Historic Resources Board. Catherine Galtieri did a particularly good job. I watched the video today. What makes me very sad is that something that was conceived out of unity, out of a celebration of what people thought was the end of war, a celebration of all the people that did serve and did contribute and did come back alive, has been turned into such a divisive issue within our community. Such a divisive issue that people are not speaking to each other. That is wrong. That is wrong in every way. And belittling people's service by calling them homebodies. These people were far from homebodies. The Kellogg's went to Belgium. The Kellogg's saved people. Perry Newberry was deployed. He tried to join, but he couldn't because he was too old. But he didn't sit home. He didn't slap a little sticker on the side of his car like people do today saying, I support the troops. These people served in their own special way. I do believe the arch is sacred to us and should not be, a plaque should not be on the arch. I don't think anybody has ever talked about the plaque being on the arch. It was going to be down in front of the arch so that it could be close to it, so that it wasn't lost somewhere else. I did a little reading about memorials. Memorial walls, memorial arches that were carved were primarily carved so that people could touch a loved one's name, a loved one that didn't come home, and feel close to them. That was pretty special. We were so fortunate that these people came home. And when they came home, they had the spirit to create something inclusive. The names on Sumner Green's plaque were interspersed, and they were both the auxiliary people, the Hopper and Newberry, they were interspersed with the other men who were enlisted people. They didn't separate them out. I think it only became separated perhaps when Richard decided to do a good thing and somehow commemorate who these people were. I do think the plaque is a little too big and a little too wordy and contains things that don't need to be there. I think Cindy Lloyd had a very good idea to refer this back to the Historic Resources Board for placement and determination of what should go on that plaque at a time when meetings can be held in person. Part of this misunderstanding and this division has happened because of technology and the fact that some people don't use it or can't use it, can't communicate with email, can't communicate well through this technology. I'm not sure that all of this division would have happened if they'd all been in the same room. So while I cannot support upholding an appeal that does away with this completely, I can support keeping the arch intact the way it is and referring the arch and referring the plaque back to the Historical Resources Board. And I support inclusivity like the people in 1921 supported. This does not denigrate any feeling about enlisted servicemen at all. And I don't think we can take contemporary feelings about that service back to what they were feeling in 1921. They thought they had ended the wars to end all wars, and they wanted an inclusive community.
Thank you, Karen. Nicely said. Jeff?
Thank you. Like the rest of my council members, I have also sort of bifurcated this appeal into sort of two issues. One is the content of the plaque or something like that. And the second is whether or not the plaque should be on the arch itself. I do think that Ian and Richard made a case that that they were trying to honor, as Ian said, the wishes of the Carmel of yesteryear. And I think that's important. The monument was built 100 years ago, and it is what it is. We can't, we shouldn't try to change history by putting words in the mouths of people that did something 100 years ago. But I think, to everyone else's point, another thing that was done 100 years ago was that the plaque was put in City Hall. It wasn't put on the monument. And I think that that's important. I think they had the opportunity to put the plaque on the monument, and yet that's not where it ended up. And so I don't agree that the monument, I don't agree that that it belongs there. And in fact, I had a pretty substantial discussion with Marnie, and we were talking about the Secretary of the Interior Standards. So if I can go through what the HRB and sort of explain my reasoning here. And as I was reading these 10 standards, the Secretary of Interior standards apply to a piece of property. They talk about chemical or physical treatments of houses and archaeological resources and new additions or exterior alterations. They don't apply to pieces of work or monuments. And so I think that the wrong standard has been used here. I think a more appropriate standard would be treating the monument as a piece of art, not as a house. And so I think that the monument needs to basically be either evaluated by that standard or left alone. And in fact, I would go a little bit further. As I was going through these 10 things, it struck me that there are already 2 plaques on the monument, and I also believe that those plaques should be removed. One of them talks about the restoration in 1971, and the other was apparently added, I think, a few years before that, about people who serve. I don't exactly remember at 9 o'clock at night what was on it. But I think that those plaques should also be removed from the arch. And I think that the arch should be restored to the state in which it was built in 1921, absent a more thorough analysis. And I would point out, there have been some remarks about putting this plaque in the park, in Devendorf Park, with the rest of the memorials, with the rest of the monuments or memorials. And I'm not exactly sure that I agree with that. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I would hate for our park to become a park of memorials. People built, this arch predates almost everything. It was put in the middle of this intersection. And I think that that's a good place for it. And I think that if we want to talk about the people, the World War I place is in the middle of San Carlos where it is. And I would suggest, maybe as an alternate to simply putting another plaque in the park that's already full of plaques, that we either put the plaque in City Hall where it was originally intended to be put, or perhaps we could mount it on one of the 2 buildings on the corner of Ocean and San Carlos. And that would remind me, people would walk past these plaques and they would see, they would look at the wall and they would see the reference to the arch and they would go, this is a little bit, like looking at something in a museum. Here's the description of something that's over there, which we all do when we go to museums. We look at a plaque and then we look at a piece of art, or we look at a plaque that's 10 yards from a piece of sculpture, and then we look at the piece of sculpture. And I think that it's more intriguing, and I think that it would having these words on the buildings on the side of Ocean would actually draw people to the arch and point out to people that this is something that's important. And I think that this stuff matters like everybody else. I think that these memorials matter. So I would support, I would support the appeal, and yeah, I would support the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. So Bobby, going back to what you said earlier, which I thought felt like a motion, which I'd seconded, was you were going to support the appeal, but didn't you want to refer the signage and the location, the verbiage and the location back to the commission? Was that your recommendation?
That was my recommendation, was to support the appeal, to leave the arch alone, and then take this very important plaque and put it, look for a placement. If Jeff doesn't think it's right in the park, but 4 of us do, then I think it should go in the park, or however that's going to work. But I think that it should be seen. I think it should be visible. I think both, just as it was in the paper, all of those names were on the original plaque. I think in the original plaque, they were separated by enlisted and by volunteers or auxiliaries. And I think that is a good distinction. I don't have, as being both of them, I think that's the right thing. So that would be my suggestion, or my motion.
So your motion is then to, this kind of clarification, your motion then is to go ahead and approve the arch without the sign, and refer the sign back for location and verbiage correction or modifications to the commission for recommendation to us for decision on those items at a later date.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, and I don't want to confuse the matter, but this is an application. So the applicant may not, unless we're going to take this over as a city project, the applicants may not wish to have the plaque language modified or placed somewhere else. So I think that the direction has been heard, but maybe not make the second part of the motion direction to the HRB, because they may not have anything to review. So the first part of it, that's within your right to review and deny the overturn the decision of the HRB and grant the appeal, and then with further direction about something that you'd like to see done with a plaque in the future. And again, if the applicants, Mr. Kreitman, Mr. Martin, and others don't want to go forward, then we'll queue it up, and we can talk about having it as a city project at some point in time in the future.
So Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Bobby, for your deference to my location. And I don't claim to know where the plaque should go. I was just offering a suggestion, which is frankly probably not my place. But I do think that there's something to be said for sending it back to the HRB as far as removing the 2 plaques that are on there. That is, I do have I would certainly support the motion as it is to just accept the appeal and deny putting the plaque on the memorial arch itself. But I do think there's a little bit of investigation as to whether the 2 plaques that are on there right now should actually be removed and truly restore the arch to sort of the bare state in which it was created in 1921.
So I'll make the motion to support the appeal. Is that how I make that one?
Sounds like an amending motion.
I would suggest that it would be to grant the appeal. Yeah, if that's what you're looking to do is grant the appeal. And Brian, as the city attorney, he may want to weigh in on actual language needed.
Motion to grant the appeal is fine if that's what you want to do. I mean, the other alternative would be a motion to deny the appeal.
No, so I'll make the motion to grant the appeal, and with hopes that the hard work that Ian and Richard and the rest have done, bring it back and somehow get that important plaque placed somewhere.
I'll second it. Okay, are we clear on the motion?
This is Brian, Mayor. The motion was made, but then there was some commentary after it. I'm just not sure whether the comment that was made was intended to be part of the motion or it was just a comment.
Bobby? It sounded to me like it was comment, but.
Yeah, it's comment. The motion is to deny or support the appeal.
Karen, did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify for Bobby that the mock-up of what was probably going to be the plaque by Charles Sumner Green, all the names were interspersed. They were not divided.
Okay.
Okay, they were not. I want to clarify that. And there's pictures of it in our packet, and Ian has provided pictures of that. They were all inclusive.
Okay. 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 Thank you, Karen.
Later.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Is staff clear? Okay. All right. All right, let's call the question then. Ashley, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Councilmember Ferlito.
No.
Councilmember Tice.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Richards.
Yes.
Mayor Potter.
Aye.
It's 4-1.
All righty. Thank you. And now let's just look at the final item, which has been continued. This gets to future agendas. I think we've probably got enough on our docket now that we don't need to add anything else, I would hope. But if there is something that's got a burning desire, Jeff, what are you up to?
Yeah, I simply use this opportunity to ask you a question, Dave. Earlier in this meeting, I sort of took on the task of investigating a policy to deal with the grease separators on public property with respect to, excuse me, with respect to the other restaurants. And I would ask you for permission to sort of separate that out into 2 agenda items. One, to sort of bring a policy back to the council, for me to work with staff to bring a policy back to the council so that Carrie could participate in that, and then take the second item separately, which would be the actual grease interceptor that's a part of the hotel. Does that make sense? I don't feel comfortable talking about a policy without all 5 members of the council here.
I understand what you're talking about, Jeff. This council, Brian, are you comfortable with that?
This is future agenda items, so I think we could probably, well.
I just want to make sure that the bifurcation of the issue works from a legal standpoint.
I don't see any issues. I don't see any issues with that.
Good, good.
So that's okay, Dave?
It's good, yes, very good.
Okay.
Appreciate you being drafted and volunteering at the same time. Very good of you. Thank you. All right, that noted, let's stand adjourned, guys. Thank you all for your hard work tonight. We're almost unanimous on all our decisions, but good discussion on all topics. I appreciate it. So thank you all very much.
Good job, council.
Well said. Thank you, staff.